Chapter 2342. Bang! Dozens of divine soul fragments fell from the sky. The white-robed elder's body and soul were completely destroyed. Only Ji Tianxing and the two divine souls were left in the cave. The two divine souls were full of anticipation. They thought the white-robed elder could turn the tables and win. But they never thought that the white-robed elder would be killed by Ji Tianxing, even though he was 10 times stronger. Fear filled their divine souls. When Ji Tianxing turned around, the two of them woke up and quickly ran to the entrance of the cave. Swish, swish! The two divine souls ran as fast as the aurora. But the outcome was already decided. Ji Tianxing formed a sword art with both hands and shot out 2 beams of starlight. 2 10-meter-long starry sword lights instantly traversed 30 miles and pierced into the 2 balls of God's souls. Bang, bang! With a muffled sound, the 2 divine souls collapsed at the same time and turned into dozens of pieces, scattering in the sky. The 3 saints of the East Sea were now dead. They were full of ambition and came to the ruins of God from afar, thinking that they could get an opportunity or even a divine artifact. But in the end, after going through all kinds of trials and tribulations, they were all defeated and died in this cave. The cave became silent again. Ji Tianxing walked to the front of the stone tomb and started to crack the defensive array. The defensive array of the stone tomb was the same as the one Ji Tianxing had cracked before. It was a normal array. With his previous experience, he only used a few dozen breaths of time to break the divine array. Swish! The 5-colored light shield fell apart and quickly disappeared. But the stone tomb was still calm, and there was no sign of a divine artifact. There was only a faint golden and silver light in the cracks of the black rocks. Ji Tianxing could clearly feel that the golden and silver light contained surging divine power. So, he waved his hand and shot out a few beams of sword light into the cracks of the rocks. Crack, crack, crack! With a series of crisp sounds, the stone tomb was cut into pieces. Dozens of rocks were crushed into pieces. Dazzling golden and silver light surged out of the huge gap and lit up the cave. The surging divine power aura was like a tidal wave that washed over Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing's eyes were filled with anticipation. He stepped through the gap and entered the stone tomb. In the middle of the stone tomb, there was an arrayed disc made of white jade on the ground. The arrayed disc had a radius of 3,000 meters and was engraved with crisscrossing lines that flickered with a dazzling light. In the middle of the disc, 2 strips of light lay quietly on the ground. There was a golden light on the left and a silver light on the right. Both were about 4 feet long, straight and narrow. This was the source of the divine aura and the gold and silver light. Ji Tianxing flew over with a heart full of hope and landed in the middle of the formation plate, observing the 2 light strips at a close distance. Only now did he see clearly that it was shockingly 2 peerlessly gorgeous and exquisite treasured swords. On the left was a 4-foot-long golden sword. The hilt of the sword was dark gold in color and carved with mysterious patterns. The blade was as thin as a cicada's wing. On the right was a 4-foot-long silver sword. The hilt of the sword was dark silver in color and was also engraved with mysterious patterns. The ultra-thin blade was almost transparent. These 2 identical treasured swords were clearly a pair. Both swords were divine weapons and were of the same grade as the God Execution flying dagger. Moreover, the placement of the gold and silver swords was also mysterious. The hilt of the golden sword was facing up and the tip was facing down. The tip of the silver sword was facing up and the hilt was facing down. The 2 swords were placed side by side and looked very perfect and coordinated. They contained an indescribable concept. Martial God Nangong was indeed a great talent. He could be said to be the most outstanding martial god in the past 10,000 years. It's a pity that he died too early. Ji Tianxing muttered in a low voice and reached out to pick up the gold and silver swords. The 2 divine swords in his hands were as light as a feather. The golden sword's aura was scorching and violent, while the silver sword's aura was soft and cold. The 2 complemented each other and were actually compatible with the Tao of Yin and Yang. Their power was endless and inexhaustible, Ji Tianxing was very satisfied. He held the two swords in his hands and carefully observed them. He found that there were two ancient characters engraved on the hilts of the two divine swords. He frowned and thought for a while before he recognized the two characters, shadowless. Shadowless sword? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows. Magic power gushed out from his hands and poured into the two swords. Suddenly, the two swords released a dazzling gold and silver light and emitted an unparalleled sharp sword intent. However, the two swords that were as thin as a cicada's wings disappeared. I see. It's really mysterious. A playful smile appeared on Ji Tianxing's face as he nodded in satisfaction. He played with the shadowless dual swords and calculated in his mind. The quality of the shadowless dual swords has reached the middle void god level, surpassing Luo Shui's reverse water divine sword. Since that's the case, I'll give these two divine swords to Yao Yao. She can use them in the future and replace the silver moon dual swords. Also, I'll let her refine that divine armor to prevent her from suffering such serious injuries again. After making up his mind, Ji Tianxing put away the shadowless dual swords. He carefully inspected the stone tomb. Other than the shadowless dual swords, there were no other divine weapons. The only valuable thing was the formation plate under his feet, which was made of supreme grade spiritual jade. However, Ji Tianxing was not interested in this. Swoosh! He jumped and flew out of the stone tomb and landed in the cave. He looked around at the multicolored gemstones, and a smile appeared on his face. I thought that these precious gemstones were only used to set up a formation. I didn't expect that white-haired old man to remind me that these gemstones have other uses. I have to take them away and study them properly. As he spoke, he waved his hand and sent out two giant golden palms. Like a tornado, they picked up the gemstones on the ground and the walls. Those colorful gemstones were as big as a wash basin and were formed after at least tens of thousands of years. The gemstones were embedded in the ground and the walls and were very sturdy. However, the giant golden palms were very powerful and soon swept away all the gemstones around him. One gemstone after another fell into Ji Tianxing's hands and entered his spatial ring. After a full 15 minutes, he finished collecting all the gemstones. There were more than 9,000 gemstones, and they formed a small mountain in his spatial ring. Ji Tianxing clapped his hands in satisfaction and turned to leave. At this time, the entire cave shook violently. The ceiling and walls of the cave collapsed quickly, and a huge gully appeared. Rumble! A loud, muffled sound reverberated through the underground. An endless amount of earth and rocks fell from the ceiling, almost burying Ji Tianxing. He obviously knew why the cave collapsed. Previously, there were thousands of gemstones that formed a formation. The formation's power supported the cave, and it was very stable and sturdy. Now that he had taken all the gemstones, the formation was gone, and the cave was naturally going to collapse. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing did not hesitate, and hurriedly left the cave and returned to the lake. When he flew out of the lake, the cave at the bottom of the lake had completely collapsed. The lake in a radius of several thousand miles shook violently, creating huge waves. Chapter 2343. Ji Tianxing stood in the sky, looking down at the lake below. The whirlpool at the center of the lake grew bigger and bigger, eventually expanding to a radius of 100 miles. The endless lake water was swallowed by the whirlpool and poured into the depths of the ground. However, Ji Tianxing frowned, feeling that something was wrong. He clearly remembered that the underground cave was only a few hundred miles wide. Logically speaking, the lake water should be able to fill up the cave very quickly. Then, the lake should return to normal. However, the whirlpool at the center of the lake continued for 15 minutes without any signs of dissipating. The lake within a radius of a few thousand miles was also shrinking, the water level quickly dropping. Could it be that after the cave collapsed, it was connected to another place? Or did martial god Nangong set up other mechanisms deep underground? This thought flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind, and he released his divine sense to extend it underground. Soon, his divine sense reached dozens of miles underground. He found that the cave had long collapsed into ruins, filled with ravines and holes. The turbulent lake water was swallowed by those ravines and holes. Thus, he sent his divine sense into the hole and continued to explore underground. When his divine sense reached 100 miles underground, he immediately understood the reason. At the same time, his brows furrowed tightly, and his expression became somewhat serious. This was because there was a huge black crack in the rock layer 100 miles underground. That crack was thousands of feet long and dozens of feet wide, and it was filled with terrifying void power. It was actually a void crack. Endless lake water poured into the boundless void through that void crack. Tianxing suddenly understood. No wonder martial god Nangong embedded tens of thousands of gems in the cave and set up a mysterious formation. No wonder the lake water kept leaking without any signs of stopping. It's actually another void crack. Now, more and more cracks are appearing in the five elements world. I wonder if it's a blessing or a curse. A hint of worry flashed through Tianxing's eyes. However, with his current strength, even if he had a divine artifact, he could not fill the void crack. Even if the underground void crack kept swallowing the lake water, soil, and gravel, he was helpless. At this moment, he suddenly remembered something. Oh, right. The cave at the bottom of the lake was also destroyed. I wonder if there are any void cracks underground? In that cave, there were over 10,000 five-color divine stones. Just now, he was still planning to go back and dig out those god stones from the ruins. Chua! Tianxing quickly turned around and sped towards the east. This time, he did not see any martial artists fighting as he passed through the sky above the vast forest. The chaotic battle had ended. The previous groups of martial artists were nowhere to be seen. Tianxing estimated that most of the martial practitioners who had entered the illusory void mystic realm had either suffered heavy casualties or retreated. 15 minutes later, he continued to fly for 20,000 miles and returned to the grassland on the east side of the mountain range. He stood above the dark green lake. The scene in front of him made him frown and reveal a disappointed expression. The dark green lake that was a few thousand kilometers in radius had shrunk to about 800 kilometers. The water level dropped to the bottom of the lake, and the lake was almost dry. In the middle of the lake, there was a huge whirlpool that was continuously devouring the lake water. He was unwilling to give up and released his divine sense to explore the bottom of the lake. The result was as he had expected. 100 kilometers underground, in the hard rock layer, there was also a void crack that was 10,000 meters long. That void crack had not only devoured the lake water, but also endless soil and stones, including the debris of the collapsed cave, as well as the multicolored gemstones in the cave. They were all swallowed up. The few dozen five-colored gems that were left were also sinking and were about to be devoured by the void crack. Tianxing was stunned for a moment and murmured, "If this continues, the entire illusory void mystic realm will be devoured by the void crack soon." However, Nangong martial god's divine artifact is already in my hands, so this mystic realm is worthless. Thinking of this, the disappointment in his heart lessened a lot. He did not stay any longer and flew towards the south. When he and Yun Yao entered the mystic realm, they were on the southernmost mountain. There was a teleportation formation that was the exit of the mystic realm. Not long after, Tianxing left the illusory void mystic realm. Shua! With a flash of light, he returned to the gloomy cave. Outside the cave was a valley surrounded by clouds and mist. Tianxing returned to the valley and looked around. The traces of the previous battle were still there, and the surroundings were still ruins and pits. However, the valley was dead silent, and there were no traces of martial artists. A few days ago, nearly 200 martial lords and martial saints had gathered here, and it was very lively. Now, more than half of the martial artists had died in the battle or died in the illusory void mystic realm. The majority of the remaining martial artists all suffered serious injuries. Some had already escaped, and some were still in the mystic realm, desperately searching and plundering resources. Tianxing did not linger any longer. He leaped into the sky and left. In 2 days, Ji Tianxing crossed the divine ruins and the 100,000 great mountains. On the morning of the third day, he finally returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. He had been away for nearly half a month. Fortunately, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was still the same as before. There were not many changes, and he did not encounter any danger. Ji Tianxing landed outside the Pillar of Heaven's palace, and the guards at the gate hurriedly bowed to him. As soon as he returned to his residence, Huanglong Daoist rushed over after hearing the news. Reporting to Master, disciple Huanglong requests an audience. Huanglong Daoist stood outside the door with an anxious face, and his heart was filled with worry. Just now, the guards reported to him that Ji Tianxing's hair was disheveled, and his body was covered in blood and mud. It seemed that his injuries were extremely serious. How could he not be anxious and worried? Come in. Ji Tianxing sat at the table, holding a cup of spiritual tea with both hands. Huanglong Daoist stepped into the room and looked at him with concern. He quickly asked, "Master, I heard from the guards that you were seriously injured." Halfway through his words, he stopped and swallowed the second half of his sentence back into his stomach. It was because Ji Tianxing had changed into a brand new white robe, and his long hair was combed and tied up in a bun. At a glance, other than looking a little tired, there were no obvious injuries. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said calmly, "Huanglong, you don't have to worry. I was indeed seriously injured, but it's no longer a big problem. Moreover, I have already killed Yi Lushui, Wu Duantian, and more than 10 martial saints of the Heaven and Divine Nation. I have also obtained the divine weapon left behind by martial god Nangong. However, your master's wife's injuries are too serious, and she is currently in a coma. In the next period of time, I will treat her injuries and refine the divine weapon. If there's nothing important, don't disturb me." Hearing him say this, Huanglong Daoist immediately heaved a sigh of relief and felt a little excited. He quickly nodded and said, "Master, please don't worry. I understand what to do. You can rest assured and treat your master's wife." Chapter 23:44. After the Huanglong Daoist left, Ji Tianxing entered the secret chamber. He took out the sword of burial of heaven and opened the sword world. Yin Yao was still in a deep sleep. She was wrapped in 5-colored light as she lay in the secret chamber of peaceful Earth City. The 5-colored light was obviously much weaker and would dissipate in a few days. Yin Yao had also absorbed more than half of the array formation's power. Her injuries had already stabilized and were slowly recovering. However, the sword world was not suitable for her to heal. Ji Tianxing took her out of the sword world and placed her on the jade bed in the secret chamber. Then, he carefully checked Yin Yao's injuries. Yin Yao's aura was calm and peaceful, but her soul was a little weak. Her physical injuries had already recovered by more than half. After another half a month of treatment and recuperation, she would be completely healed. The real problem was her internal injuries and the injuries to her soul. Fortunately, the 2 children in her womb were fine. They had just exhausted all their strength and were too tired, so they were also recuperating in a deep sleep. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing was truly relieved. He ignored his own injuries and refused to rest even if he was mentally exhausted. He sat cross-legged in front of the jade bed and began to cast a spell. He shot out 2 streams of 5-colored light and injected them into Yin Yao's body. Under his control, 2 streams of gentle and thick dermic powers continuously healed Yin Yao's meridians, bone marrow, and physical injuries. The secret chamber was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Only the dense multicolored brilliance illuminated the secret room, making it bright and dark at times. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. Yin Yao's physical injuries had recovered by 80%. She only needed to recuperate for a few days to fully recover. Ji Tianxing had been casting spells continuously for 3 days. His body and mind were both very tired. However, he did not rest. He continued to cast a secret spell to heal Yin Yao's internal injuries and soul injuries. This process was very taxing and the progress was very slow. However, Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry. He patiently cast the spell and healed her bit by bit. For 10 days and 10 nights, he didn't close his eyes, nor did he rest. On the 11th day, his spirit and magic power were completely exhausted. He was so tired that he almost fainted. Only then did he finish casting the spell. 70% of Yun Yao's internal injuries had been healed, and her divine soul's aura had also become more vigorous. After that, he would go into seclusion to recuperate for half a year. Then, the injuries to his divine soul would be completely healed. Ji Tianxing felt slightly comforted. Then, he took out a medicinal pill and swallowed it. He circulated his internal energy to recuperate his injuries and restore his magical power. For days later, he had completely absorbed the medicinal effects. His mental state had returned to normal, and his magic power had also recovered by 90%. Therefore, he ended the healing and took out the god-slaying flying dagger from his spatial ring. The 3-inch-long golden knife floated in his palm, looking very tame. The small knife kept flashing with a golden light and emitting an extremely sharp aura. Ji Tianxing knitted his brows and thought to himself, I know at least 800 if not 1,000 techniques to refine and control the flying daggers. However, those are all at the heavenly god tier and above. I can only use them when I've recovered to the godly realm. At this stage, I can only use the divine blood imperial spirit technique to refine and control this flying dagger. After all, the divine blood imperial spirit technique has no restrictions on one's cultivation level. After making up his mind, he circulated his internal energy and forced out 2 drops of golden blood. He dripped them on the god-slaying flying dagger. Then, he formed a seal with both hands. A wisp of golden light surged out of his fingertips and connected it to the god-slaying flying dagger. He entered a cultivation state and began to nourish the god-slaying flying dagger and communicate with it. Only by completely refining this divine artifact would he be able to unleash even more power. At that time, he would be invincible below the martial god realm. He would even be able to fight against a martial god realm powerhouse. Time passed silently. Soon, another half a month had passed. Ji Tianxing cast the spell for 15 days and used his own blood to nourish the god-slaying flying dagger. Finally, he succeeded. He formed a mental connection with the flying dagger. There was no need for him to cast any more techniques. He could control the flying dagger with his mind alone. As a result, the god-slaying flying dagger became more agile and unpredictable. Its power naturally increased by several times. Ji Tianxing temporarily stopped casting the spell and checked on Yun Yao's situation. Yun Yao had already woken up. She was sitting cross-legged on the jade bed and circulating her internal energy to heal her injuries. Thus, Ji Tianxing woke her up and asked with concern, Yao Yao, how are you feeling now? Yun Yao opened her eyes and looked at him with a gentle gaze. She nodded gently and said, I feel much better now. My physical injuries have healed, but my soul is still a little weak. But that's not a problem. I'll go into seclusion to recuperate for a few more months. I'll definitely be able to recover. Qinshan and Yaya are fine too. They're just too tired and need a rest for a while. Ji Tianxing held her hands and said with a heart full of guilt, I was useless. I didn't protect you and your children well. I actually let you suffer such heavy injuries. Before he could finish, Yin Yao stretched out a finger and pressed it against his lips. Yin Yao shook her head gently and said, Tianxing, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't let us down. Don't blame yourself anymore. We were alone, but we were besieged by so many martial sages. We're lucky to be able to survive. When we decided to go to the illusory void mystic realm, we were already mentally prepared. Why would we be afraid of taking risks? Ji Tianxing frowned and continued. When we were in the cave at the bottom of the lake, I was busy breaking the formation of the stone tomb. You were fighting against Yi Lu Shui and the others alone. That's why you suffered such serious injuries. If I could, I'd rather bear such pain for you than let you and the children be hurt. Yin Yao nodded slightly and said in a gentle tone, Yes, I understand your heart. We're husband and wife. We should go through thick and thin together. How can I rely on your protection forever? At that time, We were seriously injured and were besieged by Yi Lu Shui and Wu Duantian. Only by opening the stone tomb and obtaining the divine weapon inside would we have a chance to survive. But I can't break the divine formation. Only you can. Of course, I had to stop Yi Lu Shui and the others to buy you time to break the formation. If it were someone else, even if they were just friends or companions, they would have done the same. Because we had no choice. At this point, Yin Yao paused. Besides, other women are willing to die for you. As your wife, why would I cherish my life? Ji Tianxing was stunned and said awkwardly, I knew that I can't hide anything from you. Yin Yao smiled and said, Actually, you didn't hide anything from me. I just didn't ask. But now, you don't have to explain. I can roughly guess what's going on. Ji Tianxing said with a complicated tone. Tantai Xian seems to be unrestrained and crazy. But in fact, she's determined and obsessed with love. Yin Yao nodded in agreement and said faintly, the more unrestrained she is on the outside, the emptier she is on the inside. She knows that true love is priceless. But unfortunately, she'll never get it. In other words, she's a pitiful person. Ji Tianxing thought for a while and nodded. That's true. She can't resolve the obsession in her heart. However, the person she loves is Kenshin back then, not Ji Tianxing now. Chapter 23:45. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were both silent. The secret chamber fell into silence. After a while, Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and took out 2 treasures from his interspatial ring. A crystal clear metal ball and 2 divine swords that were as thin as cicada's wings. He handed the 2 treasures to Yun Yao and explained, Yao Yao, I got these 2 divine weapons from the illusory sky secret realm. They were left behind by martial god Nangong. Although he had made many divine weapons in his life, they were all ordinary divine weapons. However, those ordinary divine artifacts had all been destroyed by him, leaving behind only the last few divine artifacts. This metal ball was a piece of armor. It had a strong defense and a self-healing ability. These 2 divine swords are a pair. They are called the Shadowless Swords. Like the armor, they are both mid-grade Void God level. Yao Yao, refine the armor and the Shadowless Swords. I can only rest assured with these 2 divine weapons. Yin Yao only took the Shadowless Swords, but didn't take the metal ball. I can refine the Shadowless Swords. They can replace the Silver Moon Swords. However, you need this armor more than I do. What will you do if I refine it? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a smile, Don't worry. I already have the Sword Saint body, and I've also cultivated the Stellar Body refinement art. I've also mastered many secret techniques. I don't need the godly armor. In comparison, you need this armor more than I do. Not only to protect you, but also to protect our child. Yin Yao thought for a while and took the metal ball. She said solemnly, Don't worry. I will refine these 2 divine weapons as soon as possible. You won't have to worry about me anymore. Ji Tianxing smiled satisfactorily and said, All right, you can stay here and heal your wounds. You can refine the divine weapons after you're healed. I still have some things to take care of. I won't waste any more time. All right, go ahead. Yin Yao nodded. She kept the armor and the shadowless swords and continued to heal her wounds. Ji Tianxing didn't disturb her anymore. He walked to the corner of the secret chamber and opened the secret door. Swoosh! He entered the passageway that was filled with sparks and flew towards the underground. In just a blink of an eye, he had entered the Star Divine cauldron deep underground, standing in the surging sea of fire. The celestial divine furnace with a radius of 200 miles was filled with silver celestial fire. Its power was extremely violent. Ji Tianxing's movements were unhindered by the sparks. He looked around and saw that the star crystal core had shrunk by half, only about 100 miles. The originally pitch-black stellar core had also become half black and half silver, releasing bright starlight. Black Dragon and Xian, you were focused on casting spells, using the starfire to refine the star core. After a few months of not seeing each other, both of them had grown in size and strength. Ji Tianxing did not disturb them. After observing them for a while, he turned around and left. According to the current situation, It would take at most a year and a half to refine the star crystal core. At that time, he would be able to use the star core to upgrade the Sword of Burial of Heaven into a divine weapon. After returning to the secret room, he sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate. The previous battle in the illusory void secret realm had strengthened his cultivation, and his strength had increased by a lot. He decided to cultivate in seclusion for a few months and try his best to break through to the 7th level Martial Saint realm. In addition, he also wanted to cultivate the 8th level of the Sword Soul Dao and practice more profound and powerful sword techniques. A few days passed. What had happened in the illusory void secret realm had spread throughout the Shenwu continent, and all the martial artists in the world knew about it. It was only now that the martial artists and commoners of the 3 divine kingdoms and the various superpowers learned about the illusory void secret realm and the Nangong martial god. The history that had been buried for thousands of years had resurfaced once again, causing a commotion. Of course, the martial artists in the world were only talking about the Nangong martial god and the illusory void secret realm. What truly shocked and excited people was Ji Tianxing's massacre in the illusory void secret realm, killing countless martial saints. The commander of the divine guards of the Tianju divine kingdom and martial god Tianju's most trusted aide, Yi Lushui, had been killed by Ji Tianxing. The founder of the Broken Sky Alliance, the continent's #1 martial saint, Wu Duantian, had also died under Ji Tianxing's sword. Even martial god Tianju's eldest son, the future Tianju divine lord, Yuan Zhen, had been killed by Ji Tianxing. Other than these 3 important figures, there were more than 10 martial saints who had been killed by Ji Tianxing. Such a valiant battle record shocked all the martial artists in the world, and they could only find it hard to believe. Everyone could not help but guess that Ji Tianxing had already broken through to the divine realm. However, those martial saints who had escaped from the illusory void secret realm swore that Ji Tianxing was still a martial saint. However, he was the true #1 martial saint, and he was invincible under the martial god realm. All sorts of rumors and news quickly spread throughout the continent, and they gradually evolved into all sorts of shocking and bizarre legends. Ji Tianxing's name was really well known, and it shook the world. All martial artists who mentioned this name would be filled with respect and reverence from the bottom of their hearts. Although he was not a divine being, he was already better than one. As such, he became the recognized 4th most powerful person in the continent, second only to the 3 martial gods. The entire continent was talking about this matter, and the atmosphere was noisy and lively. However, the atmosphere in Tianju God Nation was very oppressive and heavy. Yi Lushui had died, and Wu Duantian, Qing Shan, and Chun, the martial saints, were also dead, and even the eldest divine son, Yuan Zhen, had been killed. Martial god Tianju's trusted aides, the mainstay of Tianju God Nation, had actually lost half of them. To Tianju God Nation, this was an extremely painful loss. In the beginning, the people of Tianju God Nation were not willing to believe this news. However, as time passed, more and more rumors and news corroborated this grievous news. No one from Tianju God Nation came out to refute the rumors, and it could be said that they had tacitly agreed to this matter. There was no one in Qing Shan Empire to take charge of the situation, and the feudal lords in the country rose up, and the warlords contended for supremacy, causing the entire empire to fall into chaos. Therefore, the people of Tianju God Nation were in a heavy mood, and they were very worried and anxious. For a time, many people and martial saints were feeling insecure. Everyone was afraid that Ji Tianxing would go berserk and break into Tianju God Nation to take revenge and vent his hatred. At that time, no one would be able to stop him, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Tianju God Nation, the most majestic and solemn palace. In the depths of the palace, in a secret passage, a general in golden armor was quickly rushing to the secret room at the end of the passage. The general in golden armor was in a hurry, and his expression was filled with anxiety, and his expression was also very ugly. He walked to the door of the secret room and stood still bowing respectfully, and said, "Reporting to Divine Master, I, Lu Guan, request to see you, and I have important news to report." As his voice fell, a moment later, the door of the secret room lit up and a silver light screen condensed. A middle-aged man in golden armor and a crown appeared in the light screen. He looked at Lu Guan with a dignified expression and asked, "Why are you here to report the news? Where is Yi Lu Shui?" Chapter 2346. What? Martial god Tian Ju's eyes widened in anger. He was stunned. An invisible pressure as heavy as a mountain pressed down on Lu Jin, causing him to tremble. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He lowered his head even more and said with a trembling voice, "Sir Divine Master, our plan has failed." Not only was Lord Yi killed, Alliance Master Wu, Saint Emperor Qin Shan, and Martial Saint Chun were also killed by Ji Tianqing. Even His Highness, Martial God Tian Ju's body stiffened. His expression became more and more unsightly. He glared at Lu Jin and shouted angrily, "Yuan Jin, what happened to him?" Lu Jin could no longer withstand the terrifying pressure. His entire body was covered in cold sweat. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. He said with a sobbing voice, "His Highness, he was also killed by Ji Tianqing, and the people of the three aristocratic families were also killed by Ji Tianqing. Our people were all wiped out." The sudden news was like a bolt from the blue. Martial god Tian Ju's body stiffened. He was completely stunned. His expression was extremely ferocious. His eyes turned blood red, as if they were about to spit out flames. After a long time, he came back to his senses and roared crazily, "This is impossible. Ji Tianqing, that bastard. How could he be so powerful?" Martial god Tian Ju could not accept this result. Lu Jin did not know how to comfort him. He could only kowtow and repeat over and over again, "Sir Divine Master, please restrain your grief." Martial god Tian Ju was so angry that he almost went crazy. His entire face was warped and hideous, and his entire body surged with killing intent that shot into the sky. After a full 100 breaths, he suppressed his anger and gradually calmed down. "Yi Lu Shui was my most trusted aide. Yuan Zhen was my most beloved and most valued eldest son, the future successor. And Qin Shan, Chun Yu, and the others, they were the mainstays of the country. However, they were all killed by Ji Tianqing. With such a deep blood feud, if I don't tear Ji Tianqing into 1,000 pieces, how can I vent my hatred?" Martial god Tian Ju roared with resentment. His voice was so cold that it sent chills down people's spines. Lu Guan suppressed the fear in his heart and hurriedly advised, "Sir God, please calm down. You must not be angry and harm your body. You are now cultivating in seclusion and have reached the most critical juncture. You can't give up halfway, or else all your previous efforts will be wasted." Martial god Tian Ju gradually calmed down. He nodded with a cold face and said, "That's right. The more it's like this, the calmer I have to be. Lu Jin, give me a detailed report of what happened." Seeing that he was no longer angry, Lu Guan felt relieved. He carefully wiped his sweat and answered honestly, "Sir God Lord, it's like this." After an entire hour, Lu Jin reported everything he knew in full detail. Martial god Tian Ju knew what had happened. He could not help but curse with his teeth clenched. Who would have thought that the foolproof plan would fail so thoroughly? I thought that by sacrificing the illusory void secret realm in Lunistar Wonderland, I could exchange for Ji Tianqing's life. But in the end, I ended up in such a miserable state. What a double loss. Lu Jin thought so too, but he did not dare to say anything. He could only remain silent. Martial god Tian Ju's anger had not subsided. He continued to curse, "Ji Tianqing, that bastard." So many martial saints besieged him, but they could not kill him. His strength is already the strongest under the martial god realm. Now that he has obtained Nangong martial god's divine weapon, his combat strength must be even more terrifying. No martial saint is his match. I can only kill him after I come out of seclusion. Lu Jin nodded and flattered. "Sir God Lord is wise. Once you have mastered your divine skill, it will be easy to kill him. When that time comes, don't let Ji Tianxing die too easily. You must let him taste all kinds of pain and torture. Martial god Tian Ju nodded slightly and said expressionlessly, Lu Jin, Yi Lu Shui is dead. You will temporarily take over as the Divine Guard commander and protect the Divine Nation for me. The Green Mountain Empire will definitely be in chaos. Send people to suppress it and appoint a new Divine Emperor. As for the 3 aristocratic families, don't bother with them. A bunch of useless trash. If they do not complete the mission, they will never be able to take back Lunistar Wonderland. Martial god Tianju gave a series of orders. Lu Jin remembered them in his heart and carried them out step by step. In just 3 days, Lu Jin appointed a new divine emperor, and the chaos in the Green Mountain Empire was quelled. 10 days later, the divine nation that was in a state of panic gradually calmed down. The situation was still stable. The people of the divine nation were praying silently. They hoped that martial god Tianju would come out of seclusion soon and get rid of Ji Tianxing. Otherwise, Ji Tianxing was like a guillotine hanging over their heads that could be chopped down at any time. News of the illusory void secret realm and Ji Tianxing's deeds spread throughout the continent for 3 months. When this matter was spread by word of mouth and discussed countless times, it gradually faded away. The situation on the Xinwu continent became calm once again. The 3 divine nations were living and working in peace. The martial world was calm, and nothing major happened. Ji Tianxing did not show his face, and there was no more news about him. Although the peaceful situation was maintained for half a year, everyone knew that the Xinwu continent was at peace. However, all the martial artists in the continent knew that Ji Tianxing and martial god Tianju were mortal enemies. They would not rest until one of them was dead. When martial god Tianju came out of seclusion, there would be an earth-shattering battle. Half a year later, Tianju Mountain. Within Tianju Palace, Ji Tianxing's secret room, Yin Yao was still sitting cross-legged on the jade bed, quietly cultivating. After half a year of recuperation, her injuries had long since healed, and her strength had also returned to its peak. Furthermore, she had already refined the shadowless twin swords and was currently refining the divine armor. In a corner of the secret room, not far from her, Ji Tianxing sat cross-legged on the ground, his hands forming hand seals as he closed his eyes and cultivated. His entire body was enveloped by a layer of dazzling starlight, like a translucent light barrier that protected him. Within the light barrier, tens of thousands of silver sword chi could be seen rapidly shuttling back and forth. After half a year of bitter cultivation, his strength had increased by several times. Just 10 days ago, he had broken through to the 7th level of the martial sage realm. Moreover, he had already mastered level 8 of the Sword Soul Dao and was about to reach perfection. His Sword Dao had also improved, and he had also practiced a few new ultimate sword techniques. This had allowed his battle strength to reach a new height, making him even more unfathomable. However, he did not end his seclusion and continued to cultivate, consolidating his martial arts foundation. In any case, there was nothing going on at Tianju Mountain. Not long ago, the Huanglong Daoist had come to report that the situation on the Xinwu continent was very stable. Chapter 2347. The vast and boundless void was as cold and dark as ever. At this moment, an enormous black shadow was speeding through the void. The speed of this black shadow was as fast as the aurora. When it moved, it was silent, just like a phantom. Its target was very clear. It was the enormous star shrouded in golden light in the depths of the void in front of it. A huge and dazzling golden light barrier enveloped the entire planet like a layer of seal. When the black shadow approached the star, its true appearance could only be seen under the illumination of the golden light. It turned out that this black shadow that was 150 miles long and 100 miles wide was 51 pitch-black battleships. Each battleship was thousands of feet long. Their bodies were long, narrow, and sharp. Their shapes were strange and ferocious, and they exuded a powerful, evil aura. At first glance, The leading battleship looked the same as the other 50 battleships. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that this battleship's array patterns were denser and its power was more powerful. The flag at the front and back of the battleship was also black and gold. It was even more domineering. It didn't take long for the fleet to arrive near the star and stop outside the golden light barrier. The 50 battleships quietly stopped in the void, waiting for the command of the leading battleship. They maintained a neat formation and appeared to be well trained. Inside the leading battleship was a spacious and bright meeting hall. At this moment, 8 black-armored Heaven Punisher guards stood in 2 rows in the hall. These black-armored guards were all half-human and half-beast. They had 4 sturdy hooves. They had scales on their chests with 3 rings of dark gold patterns on them. Everyone's posture was respectful, and their eyes were filled with awe as they looked at the head of the table. At the head of the hall was a purple jade throne that was 100 feet wide. It was carved with strange and ferocious patterns. On the throne sat a gigantic black monster the size of a small mountain. This monster was very similar to the Heaven Punisher guards. It had 4 hooves on its lower body and was covered in dark gold fur. It looked like a male lion. Its upper body was similar to a human's. It had 2 arms and a large head. However, its body was covered in black scales, and 2 balls of purple fire flickered in its eyes. 2 ferocious black dragons also extended from its shoulders. 2 gigantic dragon heads stretched forward and opened their bloody mouths, looking down at the crowd with cold eyes. A faintly discernible black aura swirled around this half-human, half-beast monster, causing his aura to be sinister, terrifying, and extremely cold. At this time, a black-armored guard stepped forward and reported respectfully, reporting to General, "The main fleet has arrived at the 5 Elements world. But the situation is just as Captain and you reported. This world is sealed by a layer of divine light, and the fleet cannot enter." Without a doubt, this ferocious-looking giant with a powerful aura was the leader of the fleet. He was a commander of the Heaven-Punishing Clan's 3rd Fleet, General Long Fu. General Dragon Fu frowned, and the purple fire in his eyes became even more eerie. He grinned coldly and said, "So what if there's a divine light seal? It took us 10 months to get here, and we worked tirelessly to get here. What welcomed us was a vast world filled with endless living beings and resources. How can such a small obstacle obstruct the footsteps of my clan's conquest?" The black-armored guard cupped his fists and said respectfully, "General, please instruct me." General Dragon Fu waved his scaly claws and ordered, "Pass down my order. Tell all the captains to spread out and search the 5 Elements world for cracks and gaps in the void. Once you find anything, report to me immediately." "Yes, General." The black-armored guard bowed again and left the hall to pass down the order. About 100 breaths later, the 50 black battleships spread out and flew in all directions. They were extremely fast and were like streaks of black light cutting through the void, searching around the golden light barrier. Only General Dragon Fu's battleship remained where it was, patiently waiting for news. In the void, the concept of time would become blurry. No one knew how long had passed. Perhaps it was 7 or 8 days, or perhaps it was half a month. On this day, in the meeting hall of the Dragon Fu's battleship, a diamond-shaped black stone in the corner suddenly lit up with silver light. Immediately after, a middle-aged man's voice came from the diamond-shaped black stone. He reported in the Heaven-Punishing Clan's language, "General, the Spirit Wall battleship discovered a void. No, it's 2 cracks in the void." The middle-aged man's voice was filled with joy and excitement. General Dragon Fu, who had been resting with his eyes closed, was also awakened by this person's voice. He instantly opened his eyes and smiled. "Very good. The captain of the Spirit Wall battleship has done well. I will reward you accordingly." General Dragon Fu's voice was transmitted through the diamond-shaped black stone. Soon, the captain of the Spirit Wall battleship said excitedly, "General, thank you for your reward. I will return to lead the way now." As his voice fell, the silver light from the diamond-shaped black stone dissipated. The hall regained its silence. General Dragon Fu looked at the captain of the guards and ordered, "Pass down the order. Tell all the captains to return and gather." The captain of the guards nodded and hurriedly went to pass down the order. What followed next was another long wait. After 10 days, the 50 black battleships finally returned and gathered in the void. With the dragon subduing General's command, the entire fleet set off in a majestic manner. The Spirit Wall battleship led the way at the front and led the fleet in a certain direction. The speed of the fleet was extremely fast, like a bolt of black lightning streaking across the void. However, the Five Elements world was simply too big. Compared to this planet, the fleet was so small that it could be ignored. After another 8 days of hurrying, the fleet finally arrived at the crack in the void that the Spirit Wall had discovered. They saw that there were 2 tiny black holes in the dazzling golden barrier. The 2 holes were not far apart and were of the same size. They were both long and narrow, about 1,000 feet long. The Heaven Punishers and the dozens of battleships used a secret technique to observe the 2 holes. The holes were about the size of a battleship. If they wanted to successfully enter the holes, the battleships would have to shrink. The Spirit Wall battleship took the lead. The entire battleship lit up with starlight and quickly shrunk by 50%. When the battleship was only 500 feet long, the Spirit Wall battleship flew toward the golden barrier and entered the crack in the void. The dragon's subduing general and the dozens of captains were all watching intently. Seeing that the Spirit Wall battleship had successfully entered the Five Elements world, General Dragon Fu was relieved and ordered the fleet to advance. Then, one battleship after another shrunk their bodies and entered the Five Elements world through the 2 cracks in the void. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 15 minutes later, all the battleships entered the Five Elements world. The void regained its calm and became deathly silent again. At the same time, in the Illusion Sky secret realm, 51 battleships lined up neatly in the sky, filled with cracks. Chapter 2348. The current illusory sky mystic realm was completely different from before. The sky was filled with crisscrossing cracks, and the ground was filled with gullies and huge pits. Moreover, the ground was still collapsing, and smoke and dust filled the air. On both sides of the towering mountain range, the silver grassland and dark green forest had disappeared. The ground, soil, and rock layers were all swallowed up by the cracks in the void. The entire illusory sky mystic realm was collapsing, and it was on the verge of destruction. Seeing this, countless soldiers and captains of the Heaven Punishing clan were puzzled and worried. Everyone started whispering to each other, and their hearts were heavy. "That's strange. Why is this place so dilapidated? Didn't you send a message saying that this is a vast and resource-rich great world? Such a barren and desolate place, and it's on the verge of collapse. Did we come here for nothing? That bastard in you. How dare he lie to us? Everyone, don't be anxious. Let's wait for the general's decision." Although General Dragon Fu was sitting in the meeting hall of the flagship, he could hear the discussions of the black armored guards and soldiers in the various battleships. He could also guess the worries and concerns of the captains. Therefore, he used a secret voice transmission technique and said to the soldiers in the 50 battleships, "Everyone, don't be anxious. This is an alternate dimension that is about to be destroyed. It is not the Five Elements world. As long as we leave this alternate dimension, we will be able to enter the real Five Elements world." Hearing General Dragon Fu's voice, the captains and thousands of soldiers calmed down. General Dragon, subduing, ordered, "Scouts of the various ships, quickly explore this space and search for the exit." Soon, the battleships opened their doors, and more than a dozen scouts flew out. Many scouts in black armor spread out in the sky and searched in all directions. After about half an hour, hundreds of scouts returned to the battleships. 2 of them found a teleportation formation at the edge of the dimension in the south. Therefore, the fleet flew toward the south, passed through the teleportation formation, and left the illusory sky mystic realm. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One after another, pitch-black battleships appeared in the deep and serene canyon. It was afternoon, and the sun shone down from the sky, but could not penetrate the clouds above the canyon. 51 battleships flew into the sky one after another, overlooking the surroundings from above. Seeing the surrounding mountains and forests, the vast world, and the abundant spiritual chi, many of the heaven-punishing clan's warriors cheered excitedly. Dragon-subduing general also laughed heartily and said, "Very good. That brat and you didn't lie to me. This is indeed a world rich in resources. Ha ha! Our clan's army has arrived here. In the future, this 5-element world will be our territory." The 8 black-armored guards in the meeting hall all revealed joyful smiles. They bowed in unison and shouted, "General is mighty. Our clan will conquer the myriad of worlds, and we will definitely be invincible and become the overlords of the myriad of worlds." General Dragon Fu nodded his head in satisfaction and ordered, "Immediately send a message to Anyu and ask him where he is. We will go and meet up with him." The guard captain acknowledged the order and hurriedly cast a spell to activate the rhombus-shaped black stone to send a message to Anyu. Not long after, Anyu sent a message back, reporting his location excitedly. When General Dragon Fu received the message, he ordered the fleet to set off in the northeast direction. 51 huge, pitch-black battleships flew across the sky and headed straight for North Underworld Mountain. On the way, the fleet had to cross more than half of the divine ruins. There are thousands of mountains, rivers, and many dangerous places. However, General Dragon Fu had just arrived and did not know that this was the divine ruins. He also did not know what dangers there were in the divine ruins. Of course, no matter what dangers there were, he would not take them to heart. Not long after, when the fleet crossed a cliff, they were attacked by a large group of scorching sun golden eagles. The scorching sun golden eagles were powerful, ferocious beasts with ancient bloodlines. Each of them was as big as a palace. Hundreds of scorching sun golden eagles attacked like an earth-shattering golden light screen, covering more than a dozen battleships. However, this group of scorching sun golden eagles, who were invincible in the divine ruins and could make even martial sages retreat, met with a calamity this time. Hundreds of black armor guards rushed out of the battleships that were attacked. They were all martial sages. Holding long sabers and halberds, they charged bravely without any regard for their own safety. Soon, the scorching sun golden eagles were all killed. Hundreds of strong, scorching sun golden eagles were slashed into pieces, turning into a rain of blood that scattered in the abyss. As for the hundreds of black armored guards, not only were they not injured, they were also somewhat unsatisfied. In the past year, they had been on the road and had been bored to death in the battleships. The desire to kill and fight in their hearts had been suppressed to the point that they were about to explode. Now that they had come to a new and rich world, what they wanted to do the most was to kill and destroy. After the battle, the hundreds of black armored guards cast spells and devoured the flesh of the scorching sun golden eagles. They also refined the monster cores and crystal cores. The fleet continued to advance. However, not long after, the fleet entered a dangerous forbidden area and was besieged by a large group of ferocious beasts. There was no doubt about the result. The warriors of the Heaven Punisher clan, who had been itching for action, rushed out of the battleships and fought fiercely with the many demonic beasts. The battle was a one-sided massacre. The warriors of the Heaven Punisher clan were incomparably valiant. They easily killed batch after batch of ferocious beasts like they were chopping vegetables. The aftermath of the battle destroyed the mountains and the earth. The shockwave spread for hundreds of miles and caused the sky to collapse and the earth to crack. As a result, the ferocious demons and demonic beasts hiding in the ruins of God were all alarmed. However, this fleet did not disguise or conceal itself at all. It rampaged through the ruins of God without any scruples. Wherever it passed, no matter what obstacles it encountered, it crushed and pushed through. In the next half a month, the fleet crossed more than half of the ruins of God. The ferocious demons and demonic beasts in the ruins of God were all killed. Corpses were everywhere. Wherever the fleet passed, the earth cracked and mountains shattered. There were ruins not far away. Such a terrifying commotion also alarmed many martial artists who were exploring the ruins of God. However, the adventurers from all over the world had never seen such a strange battleship. They had also never seen such a terrifying fleet that covered the sky. Everyone hid in the distance and observed, not daring to get close. Half a month later, the fleet finally left the ruins of God and entered the Dark North Mountains. A piece of news also spread throughout the Shinwu continent. It was said that there was an incomparably powerful force hidden in the depths of the ruins of God that was comparable to the three divine kingdoms. This force had dozens of huge battleships that were completely black and filled with an evil aura. The fleet formed by dozens of battleships rampaged through the ruins of God, and no one could stop them. Even if there were thousands of savage demon beasts, they would still be crushed into pieces. Chapter 2349. South of Dark North Mountain, Jingshan Region, 100 Origin City. For the past 10 months, and you had been staying in the City Lord's manor, rarely showing his face. After the Battle of the 72 Cities, he only had 10 black-armored guards left. It was already very difficult for him to control the 200 or so demon tribes in the southern 5 regions. Because of this, and you had been shrinking his defenses, he had been forced to give up an entire region and a few dozen demon tribes. The 10 black armor guards were also extremely busy, and they were under pressure. Their situation was terrible, and the atmosphere in the City Lord's manor was stifling. And you often lost his temper and even cursed loudly. But at this moment, a burst of loud laughter suddenly rang out from the study. "Haha, this is great. This is a joyous occasion." The laughter was filled with excitement and surprise. The surging sound caused the entire study to tremble. There was no doubt that the person laughing was in you. He was sitting in his study and had just received a message telling him a piece of great news. Today, General Dragon Subduing had led 50 warships and 5,000 Heaven Punishers to successfully enter the 5 elemental realm. How could you not be excited to the point that his face was flushed red? He stood up abruptly, laughing like a madman as he danced with excitement. This lord has not endured humiliation and waited patiently for 10 months in vain. Finally, the clouds have parted to reveal the sun. General Dragon Subduing arrived so quickly and brought half a fleet with him. A total of 50 warships and 5,000 warriors and guards. Such a powerful force is enough to destroy Shinwu continent and enslave the entire 5 elemental realm. My days of humiliation have finally come to an end, and I no longer need to swallow my pride and compromise. Haha! Ever since he had entered Dark North Mountain, and you had run into a wall, he had failed to cooperate with the demons, and he had failed to attack the 72 cities. More than half of his guards had been killed, and only 10 remained. Over the past year, he had gone from being ambitious and high-spirited to being disheartened, angry, and irritable. However, for the sake of the Heaven Punisher, he could only endure. He had been hiding in 100 Origin City for so long, just for this day. A black-armored guard stood in the study. He had come to 100 Origin City today to report to Inu. When he suddenly heard this good news, he was overjoyed and excited to the point that his entire body trembled. After a while, he came back to his senses and hurriedly knelt on the ground. He cheered excitedly. "Congratulations, Your Excellency. You will soon be conferred a title and promoted. The humiliation we suffered before will soon be repaid tenfold. No, 100-fold. And he nodded proudly and grinned. "That's right. You're absolutely right. The demons of North Underworld Mountain have always been arrogant and conceited. They don't put me in their eyes at all. Once General Dragon Subduing and the army arrive, I will lead the army to conquer the north, flatten Biming Palace, and seize the entire North Underworld Mountain. At that time, I will make the ancestor fiend god and Ling Xian kneel on my feet and beg for mercy, paying the price for their arrogance." At this point, Inyu's spirits were lifted. He waved his hand and said passionately, "Wait until we have a firm foothold in the North Underworld Mountain. Then I will reconquer the 72 cities and flatten the pillar of Heaven's mountain. Ji Tianxing, that bastard, killed so many of our warriors. I will tear him to pieces and grind his bones to dust. With North Underworld Mountain, the 72 cities, and the Pillar of Heaven's Mountain, my clan's power will be further stabilized. My next target will be the 3 Divine Kingdoms. I will first destroy the Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, then occupy the Tianjue and Tianhao Divine Kingdoms. In 3 years at most, my clan will be able to control Shenwu continent and enslave the entire 5 Elements realm. All the foreign creatures will be treated like lowly beasts, slaughtered, and ordered by my clan. Ha ha! It was obvious that you had already understood the situation in Shenwu continent in the past year. At the same time, he had accumulated too much hatred and killing intent in his heart, and he had long since thought of a plan for revenge. The black-armored guard was overwhelmed by emotions, and his blood boiled. He could not help but shout, "My lord is wise. You were the first to discover this world and have a firm foothold here. You are the greatest contributor, and General Dragon subduing will definitely reward you heavily. He will also trust and regard you highly. When the time comes, you will be able to lead an army of thousands and conquer the world. You will definitely be invincible." The black-armored guard racked his brains to find the right words to flatter Yu. And Yu enjoyed it very much, and his heart was bursting with joy as he listened. He was almost immersed in his unbridled revenge and fantasizing about his grand plans. After a long time, he suppressed the joy in his heart and gradually calmed down. Although General Dragon's subduing has already led the army into the 5 Elements realm, it will still take some time for them to reach 100 Origin City. I must wait patiently until the army arrives at 100 Origin City. Only then will I be able to hold my head high. You must also keep this a secret. You must not leak this information, or else I will not let you off easily. The black-armored guard understood what Yu meant, and he hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed. "Please rest assured, my lord. This subordinate will keep his mouth shut. If there are no other instructions, then this subordinate will take his leave." And Yu nodded and calmly said, "You may leave." The black-armored guard bowed and left. The study quieted down, and only Yu remained. He walked to the window and looked coldly towards the south. His lips curled into a sinister smile. "Ji Tianxing, oh Ji Tianxing, your time of death has come. Soon I will kill my way up to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and trample you under my feet." And Yu muttered to himself, and a terrifying killing intent emanated from his body. Waiting was the most torturous and also the longest. And Yu waited in 100 Origin City for a total of 18 days before General Dragon subduing finally arrived. Early in the morning, and Yu ordered the guards and maids to clean up the city lord's residence and decorate it solemnly. At noon, a black shadow that covered the sky flew over from the horizon. It was only when the huge shadow arrived above the city that one could see clearly that it was a majestic fleet. A total of 51 pitch-black battleships were arranged in a conical formation, exuding an unparalleled sharp aura. The fleet's sudden arrival in 100 Origin City blocked the light, causing half of the city to be shrouded in shadows. The citizens of the city were terrified and extremely worried. They hid in their homes and did not dare to show their faces. Soon, the doors of the 51 battleships opened. One after another, burly and majestic figures flew out of the battleships. The leader was General Dragon Subduing, who had a ferocious appearance and was as large as a mountain. Together with 50 captains in silver armor and scarlet capes, he descended from the sky and landed in the city lord's mansion. And Yu and a few black-armored guards have been waiting in the square of the city lord's residence for many years. Chapter 2350. The dragon-subduing general led the 50 captains and landed on the square of the city lord's residence. A vigorous and domineering aura of iron and blood immediately spread out between the heavens and the earth. And Yu and a few black-armored guards quickly knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. "Welcome, Lord General." Everyone was excited, and their voices were loud and clear. The dragon-subduing general looked down at Yu from above, and a satisfied smile appeared on his dark and ugly face. He opened his big mouth and said with a voice as deep as thunder, "You may all rise." "And Yu, I am very satisfied with your great contribution this time. This five elements world is much more fertile than I imagined. And you was praised by the dragon subduing general in front of everyone, and his face instantly glowed with pride. However, he didn't show any arrogance. He said respectfully, "It is my honor to serve you." The dragon subduing general was very pleased and smiled lightly. The other 50 captains looked at Yu with envy and jealousy. Everyone knew that he would be heavily rewarded by the dragon subduing general for his great contribution. As expected, the dragon subduing general was in a good mood. He said in a dignified tone, "Yu, I have always been fair in my rewards and punishments. Since you have made such a great contribution, I should reward you well. Tell me, what do you want as a reward?" Yu naturally understood this, and he had also fantasized about receiving an extremely generous reward. However, he was very smart and didn't say what he was thinking in front of everyone. He bowed respectfully and said righteously, "Thank you, General, for your praise. It is my duty to help you solve your problems. How would I dare to ask for a reward? I am only willing to do my best to help you conquer this continent and rule over all the living beings in the world." The dragon's subduing general smile became even brighter. He nodded and said, "Ha ha. And you, I rarely paid attention to you in the past. I didn't expect you to be so loyal. Since that is the case, let us enter the main hall first to understand the situation of this world. Then, I'll think about how to reward you." And you quickly bowed and made a pleased gesture, leading the dragon's subduing general into the main hall. The spacious and bright meeting hall was immediately filled with 50 captains. The huge dragon subduing general sat on the extra-large throne at the head of the table. This was a throne that you had crafted in advance, and it suited the dragon's subduing general's needs. The 50 captains were divided into two groups, standing respectfully on both sides of the hall. General Dragon subduing looked at Yu and asked, "In the transmission earlier, you only gave a simple report of the situation in this world. Now, you have to report the situation of the world in detail." And Yu bowed and methodically replied, "Reporting to the general, the Shenwu continent that we are currently on is extremely vast, and its resources are abundant. There were 3 divine kingdoms on this continent, as well as many small independent forces and strange races. The area we are in is called the North Underworld Mountain. It is the territory of the demon race." In the next 2 hours, and Yu continued to narrate the story. He spoke clearly about the situation on the Shenwu continent, as well as the grudges between him, Dark North Mountain, and Tianju Peak. The 50 captains remained silent and listened attentively. Dragon's subduing general listened patiently and would occasionally ask a question or two. Finally, 2 hours passed, and Yu had explained everything that needed to be said, and the dragon's subduing general and the captains had a preliminary understanding of the situation on the continent. The dragon's subduing general muttered to himself thoughtfully for a moment before saying with a dignified expression, "I believe that everyone has heard that this great world is very vast, and its resources are abundant. However, the number of powerhouses in this world is very small. There are only 3 martial gods and a few hundred martial saints. As for us, we have 52 martial gods and 5,000 martial saints. He. With such a great disparity in strength, our race will be able to easily sweep through this world." The 50 captains in the hall suddenly smiled and began to discuss with each other proudly. Such a vast and rich world has been taken over by a bunch of weak ants. The heavens are truly blind. That's right. It's because the heavens are unfair that we, the Heaven Punishers, have come here to restore order. A group of sheep guarding a vast grassland is too tempting. I really want to go on a killing expedition. When the general gives the order to attack, let's have a competition. Let's see who can take over more territories and invade faster." The captains of the martial God Realm battleships were all rubbing their fists. They could not wait to start the war. As for the forces in this world, they did not care at all. 3 martial gods and a few hundred martial saints were not a threat to them. The dragon's subduing general swept his gaze across the hall and raised his claws that were covered with dragon scales. When everyone quieted down, he then said, "Everyone, although the races in this world are very weak and we can easily kill them all, please do not be impatient. However, everyone, please calm down and don't be too impatient. We have just arrived, and we need to gain a firm foothold first. After we familiarize ourselves with the situation, it will not be too late to start the war. Since we are already here, the outcome has already been decided. A cooked duck cannot fly away. After the dragon's subduing general finished speaking, and you quickly chimed in, that's right. The general is wise. Although there are very few powerhouses in this world, the three martial gods are only on the surface. I suspect that the number of martial gods in this world is far more than the three of them. Moreover, the history of this world is very long. In the ancient times, 30,000 years ago, there seems to have been a great war between the gods. All in all, this world is not as simple as it seems. We have to treat it with caution. The dragon subduing general's interest was piqued by Inyu's words, and he asked about the war between the gods. And he did not know much, but he still tried his best to answer the dragon subduing general's questions. The 50 captains in the hall were whispering to each other. They were not happy with Inyu's performance. TSK, is Inyu scared out of his wits? What is there to be afraid of in such a weak world? So what if there are 30 martial gods, let alone 3? Won't they be killed by us very quickly? Have you noticed that Inyu has very few bodyguards, and they are all injured? I'm sure that Inyu has definitely lost the war and suffered a great loss. That is why he is so cautious and timid. One of the reasons is that he is scared out of his wits. The other reason is that he wants to flatter the general. There is no choice. After all, he has made such a great contribution. From now on, he will be the general's favorite. We cannot afford to offend him. Chapter 23:51. 100 breaths of time passed, and you explained the events of the ancient battle to General Dragon, subduing. General Dragon, subduing, frowned and pondered for a moment before waving his hand to signal for everyone to be quiet. The captains, who had been whispering and discussing, immediately fell silent. General Dragon, subduing, said with a dignified expression, "During this period of time, I've already considered what reward to give to Inyu. A year ago, he discovered this world and gained a foothold here. He has interacted with the powerhouses of various races and has the clearest understanding of the 5 elements realm. Therefore, I have decided to make Inyu the right Deputy General of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet under the Southern Expedition Marshal. From today onwards, Inyu will be my Deputy General. He will assist me in conquering cities and conquering the entire Shenwu continent. In addition, each warship will assign 2 elite warriors to be under Inyu's command to form his guards." General Dragon's subduing, dignified voice reverberated throughout the hall. The expressions of the 50 captains immediately changed, and their eyes widened in shock. "Are you serious? Directly promoting Inyu to Deputy General? This reward is too shocking. Doesn't that mean that we will all have to listen to him from now on? He wants us to assign 2 elites from each warship to him? What about his own guards? Are they all dead?" Everyone was shocked by General Dragon subduing's promotion of Inyu, but they were also unwilling to assign 2 elites to him. However, everyone understood that this was General Dragon subduing's order, and no one dared to disobey. General Dragon subduing heard everyone's exclamations and discussions, but he did not take them seriously. However, he didn't take it to heart and continued to announce, "Other than the rewards mentioned above, I will also reward you with 9 blood soul stones and a top-tier godly technique." The captains, who were already shocked, were so jealous that their eyes turned red when they heard this reward. "We have made great contributions, but we can only get 1 blood soul stone at most." He actually got 9 at once. With Inyu's current strength, if he refines 9 blood soul stones, won't he reach the 5th level of the martial god realm? A high-grade divine skill is so precious. There's so many of us, and we have conquered half of the star field, but no one has ever received such a reward. General Dragon subduing Inyu? "General, aren't you favoring Inyu too much?" "General, please retract your order. Such an exaggerated reward is really hard for us to accept." Previously, the captains were envious and jealous, so they only whispered in secret. Now that the dragon's subduing general wanted to reward them with 9 blood soul stones and a superior grade divine skill, everyone couldn't sit still anymore. This was no longer a matter of jealousy. Instead, he felt that it was unfair. The dragon's subduing general looked at everyone with a cold expression and said in a dignified tone, "And Yu's contribution is enough for my reward. This is my order. Anyone who disagrees will be punished according to the law." As soon as he finished speaking, the hall became completely silent. Everyone shut their mouths, and Yu quickly knelt on the ground and kowtowed respectfully. "This subordinate is extremely grateful for the reward, General." "Don't worry, General. I will do my best to help you rule the world." Dragon's subduing general nodded slightly, indicating for Yu to stand up. Then, he waved his hand at the captains in the hall and ordered, "All of you, go back to the warships to rest and wait for further orders." The 50 captains didn't dare to say anything. They bowed in unison and quickly left. However, before they left, many of them glared at Yu angrily. Yu's expression didn't change, but he was very proud of himself. At this moment, he felt that all the humiliation he had suffered in the past was worth it. The hall quietened down. Only the dragon's subduing general and Yu were left. The dragon's subduing general looked at Yu and said in a low voice, "Yu, I will let the army rest here for a few days. At most 5 days later, the army will set off for battle. Do you have a battle plan? Or do you have any suggestions?" Yu thought for a moment and said, "General, for the past half a year, I have been thinking about this matter. To be honest, I have already made plans and preparations. Now that the army is here, we will first attack the demons in the north, flatten the Biming Palace, and occupy the entire Biming Mountain. We will use the Biming Mountain as our base camp and enslave those cruel and bloodthirsty demons. Billions of them will work for us. Then we will expand outwards and attack the 72 cities, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and the 3 divine kingdoms. We will be successful and crush everything." The dragon's subduing general shook his head expressionlessly and said in a low voice, "Your plan seems to be stable and well-planned. There won't be any mistakes. However, I don't think so. The army has just arrived, and it is not suitable to start a war with the demons. You also said that the demons have a large number of people and are very similar to our race. They are very powerful. Moreover, the leader of the demons is the ancient great demon god. He once killed countless gods. We should first take care of the weak forces and grow stronger step by step. When the time is right, we will take care of the demons and occupy the Biming Mountain." Yu thought for a while and nodded. "General, you are right. That ancestor great demon god is very mysterious. I can't figure it out either. However, the legends about it are true and can't be ignored. In your opinion, what should we do? Attack the 72 cities and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains first and occupy these 2 territories?" The dragon's subduing general nodded and revealed a meaningful smile. "Yes, that's right. However, before we set off, I would like to meet the leader of the demons." Yu was stunned and asked doubtfully, "General, why do you want to meet him? To spar with him? Or to negotiate?" The dragon's subduing general sneered. "Of course, to discuss cooperation. We have conquered 2 galaxies, and our strength has been increasing continuously. We have relied on one to control another. We can only maximize our benefits by making use of the native races of the various worlds and reduce the casualties of our race. If we let our warriors charge in all the battles, how long can we fight? How many galaxies can we occupy?" Yu was enlightened and smiled. "I see, I understand now. Back then, I also had the same idea and went to negotiate with the ancestor great demon god personally. However, the ancestor great demon god was very arrogant and had been in seclusion. He only sent a trusted subordinate to discuss cooperation with me, but we couldn't reach an agreement. Now that general is here, the ancestor great demon god has to appear no matter what." The dragon's subduing general nodded slightly and ordered in a dignified tone, "It is good that you can understand my intentions. You can leave now. I want to rest for a few days before heading to the demon's nest. Also, try to find more useful books. I want to deepen my understanding of the five elements world. Chapter 2352. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. 51 warships continued to hover in the air above 100 Origin City. The demon commoners in the city were no longer fearful and worried, and they resumed their normal lives. Of course, the commoners were secretly guessing that the power of the foreign city's governor had suddenly increased, and that there would definitely be new plans and actions. During these 5 days, General Long Fu had been resting in the governor's manor and had not shown his face. His strength was unfathomable, and he had already reached the peak of the martial god realm. With Yu's help, he only needed 4 days to learn the basic words and languages of the human and demon races. He then asked Yu to find tens of thousands of books, and he flipped through them at an astonishing speed. He only needed to scan with his divine sense to quickly finish reading a book and memorize it. In a short 24 hours, he had finished reading tens of thousands of books. He now had a deeper understanding of the Shinwu continent's culture and history. One afternoon, General Long Fu was flipping through books in his study. Footsteps suddenly sounded from outside the door, and Yu quickly entered the study and bowed to General Long Fu. He reported, "General, I sent a letter to Beiming Palace yesterday, and I just received a reply from the great demon saint, Ling Xian." General Long Fu closed his eyes and continued reading with his divine sense. He did not even raise his head as he asked, "What's the situation?" And Yu frowned and replied angrily, "I've already explained that the general has led an army here and wishes to discuss important matters with the ancestral demon god. However, Ling Xian is still arrogant and rude, and he actually rejected our visit. He said that there is no connection between the two races, and there is no need for cooperation. Rather than targeting Beiming Mountain, we might as well set our sights elsewhere. After all, Beiming Mountain is just a barren and cold place, while there is a vast and rich world outside." After hearing this, General Long Fu stopped flipping through the books and slowly opened his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a meaningful sneer. You sent him a letter yesterday, but he only replied today. What does this mean?" This was not Ling Xian's decision, but a decision he made after discussing it with the ancestral demon god. And Yu was stunned for a moment before a look of realization appeared on his face. He quickly nodded and said, "I see. Lord General is indeed wise." General Dragon, subduing, ignored his flattery and continued, "On the surface, it seems that the demons have rejected our visit, which is truly arrogant and rude. But this just shows that the demons are afraid of our power and are worried that we will invade Dark North Mountain. Therefore, they expressed that the North Underworld Mountain was not worth our effort and advised us to set our sights elsewhere. This is actually admitting defeat, compromising, and giving in." And he nodded his head and said with admiration, "General, you are really brilliant. You didn't even need to look at the letter. You were able to deduce the truth just by looking at the clues. I really admire you. Since the demons have shown weakness, what are we waiting for? Why don't you lead the army to conquer North Underworld Mountain and enslave all the demons?" General Dragon Fu looked at him from the corner of his eyes and said with a playful smile, "Have you forgotten what I said a few days ago? Since you were so eager to attack and occupy the North Underworld Mountain, it seems that you have been greatly humiliated by the devil race. Are you eager to take revenge?" And Yu's body stiffened, and he quickly bowed. He smiled and said, "General, please forgive me. I was rash." General Dragon Fu retracted his cold gaze and said with a playful tone, "Ignore the demons for now. Pass down the order to prepare to conquer the 72 cities. That ancestor fiend god has an unfathomable background, but he is able to endure and give in. He is definitely not someone easy to deal with. If our race invades North Underworld Mountain, we will be able to win, but we will have to pay a price. After all, the demons are brave and skilled in battle. They are not afraid of death, and their numbers are as numerous as the hairs on a cow. In the end, what we will get is a barren land. Why bother? I understand. I will pass on the order now." And Yu bowed, turned around, and left. After Yu left, General Dragon Fu continued to read his book as if nothing had happened. After a quarter of an hour, and you returned and reported respectfully, reporting to the general, "The army is ready. Please board the leading ship and lead the troops." General Dragon Fu did not even raise his head and said indifferently, "It is just 72 cities. Why do I have to go personally? Pick 40 warships and lead the fleet. Leave 10 warships behind and send them to the various tribes and cities to plunder as much resources as possible." And Yu was stunned and subconsciously asked, "General, why do we need to plunder the resources of the 4 southern regions? Are we going to leave North Underworld Mountain?" Of course. General Dragon Fu was expressionless. "After we take down the 72 cities, that will be our main camp. Remember, don't kill everyone. We still need a large number of slaves." And Yu nodded and said expectantly, "I understand. Please rest assured, General." He then bowed and left the study. As he flew into the sky from the city lord's residence, he could no longer suppress the excitement in his heart and revealed a proud smile. "General, you really have a lot of trust in me and think highly of me. This is the first battle of the army's conquest of Shenwu continent. General, you actually let me lead the army and take full control. Haha, what an honor." As this thought flashed through his mind, Yun adjusted his silver armor and cloak, straightening his back even more. Whoosh! He stepped onto the leading warship and strode toward the door. The 4 black armored guards on both sides bowed respectfully and shouted in unison, "Greetings, Deputy General." And Yu pretended to be dignified as he nodded and stepped onto the warship. He waved his hand in high spirits and ordered the entire army to set off. Immediately, 2 black armored guards released dark red signal arrows that shot into the sky. Boom! The 2 signal arrows exploded in the sky, releasing a dark red light that covered the sky like blood. Immediately after, a total of 40 warships flew across the sky in a grandiose manner and sped toward the south. North Underworld Mountain was adjacent to the 72 cities and was not far from each other. The Heaven Crusher's warships were basically void god treasures, which were commonly known as divine artifacts. Their flight speed was naturally extremely fast and unbelievable. A short 8 hours later, the grandiose fleet arrived within the borders of the 72 cities. In the mountain range in front of the fleet, 2 cities could be vaguely seen, and you stood on the deck at the front of the warship and looked down at the 2 ancient cities in the mountains. His lips curled into a sinister smile. 10 months ago, I personally went to conquer the 72 cities. Just as I was about to succeed, Ji Tianqing ruined my plans and caused me to suffer heavy losses. Now that I've made a comeback, I must take down the 72 cities in one fell swoop and enslave all the commoners. Chapter 2353. Bay City. This city was located in the northernmost part of the 72 cities and was the closest to North Underworld Mountain. 10 months ago, and you had led the demon army to attack. Half of the city had been destroyed, and hundreds of thousands of citizens had died under the blades of the demon race and the foreign races. There were also hundreds of thousands of citizens who had been forced to flee in Bay City. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had rushed over to save them, and repelled in Yu and the demon race's army, saving in Bay City. For the past 10 months, and Bay City had been recuperating. After such a long period of recuperation, the city that had been reduced to ruins had taken on a new look. The citizens who had fled in all directions had returned to the city and lived a normal life. Everyone thought that in Beiqing would be safe and sound for many years to come. But today, something unexpected happened. In the originally clear blue sky, a large number of black shadows suddenly appeared and blocked the dazzling sunlight. More than half of Bay City was shrouded in shadows. A cold and murderous aura scattered down from the sky and enveloped the entire Bay City. Over 1 million citizens in the city felt that something was amiss. The air seemed to have frozen, and the atmosphere in the city was extremely oppressive. Countless cultivators looked up at the sky and quickly saw that the large number of black shadows were actually dozens of pitch-black warships. When Yu led the demon race's army to attack, he had occupied in Bay City and wanted to use it as a base. His pitch-black warships floated high in the sky and had stayed there for many days. The citizens who had personally experienced that disaster were no stranger to those pitch-black and cold warships. Instantly, countless people revealed looks of horror and shock as they let out cries of despair. "Everyone look, it's those black warships again." As expected, it's those warships. Those are the vehicles of the foreign race's devils. Oh my God, there are actually 40 warships? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Back then, that foreign race devil only had one warship, and it destroyed dozens of cities. Now, there are actually 40 warships? It's over, and Bay City is finished. Everyone run. Following waves of exclamations, countless citizens fled in panic and rushed to the various city gates without a care. They had experienced that massacre and were very clear about the terrifying strength and methods of the foreign race's devils. Without a doubt, and Beijing's doomsday had arrived. In the blink of an eye, the originally calm in Beijing had fallen into chaos and panic. Hundreds of thousands of citizens rushed out of their homes and flooded through the streets and alleys, rushing toward the city gate as if their lives depended on it. The city guards guarding the city walls and city gates were also filled with fear and panic, and they were all in a mess. Fortunately, the commanders of the city guard army were still calm. They quickly stepped forward and took charge of the situation. They killed the deserters cleanly, intimidating all the city guards. Then, the city guards closed the city gates and activated the Great City Protection Array. They were ready for battle. The commoners who had rushed out of the city gathered near the city gates, but they were blocked inside the city and could not leave. The commanders of the city guard army shouted loudly to calm the panicking citizens. When the commoners saw the five-colored light shield protecting the entire city, they felt comforted and their emotions became much more stable. The chaotic situation was temporarily under control. Alarms rang out in the city lord's mansion. The city lord personally led many experts and flew into the sky above the city. But as it turned out, it was all in vain. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Two battleships slowly sailed out from the fleet high in the sky. The two battleships spread out and tilted their bodies, aiming at Beijing. A row of black holes immediately appeared on the long and narrow sides of the battleships. A terrifying bloody light was brewing inside. With a news order, the two battleships activated the array formation at the same time and released a destructive attack. Boom, 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 boom. The cannons of the two battleships spewed out dense blood-colored light pillars that descended from the sky and blasted toward Beijing. A total of 200 blood-colored light pillars shot out like a rain of arrows and instantly blasted the city protection array. The five-colored light shield within a radius of 200 miles was blasted into smithereens, and billions of light shards burst out. Then, the blood-colored light pillars blasted into the city and instantly blasted out more than 100 deep holes. At least a few thousand houses and palaces were blasted into powder and disappeared. Around the densely packed, deep holes, spiderweb-like ravines split open and dust flew into the air. Countless houses and buildings were affected and collapsed into ruins, leaving only broken fences and dilapidated walls. Of course, there were also hundreds of thousands of cultivators and commoners that were blasted into smithereens on the spot. The earth-shaking explosions lasted for a long time before dissipating. Such destructive power caused all the commoners in the city to be horrified, and they revealed expressions of extreme despair. Including the city lord, his body stiffened as he stood rooted to the ground. His heart turned cold, and Beijing's doomsday had arrived. Faced with such terrifying power, it was difficult for the commoners to have any thoughts of resisting. The two battleships only needed to blast twice more, and Beijing would be razed to the ground. The commoners in the city were silent for a full 10 breaths. Then, furious roars and cries of despair erupted from the crowd. Right at this moment, in the fleet high in the sky, the leading Black Dragon battleship slowly opened its doors. A tall and sturdy figure in golden armor appeared at the bow of the ship. He was Deputy General Yu. He wore golden armor with a scarlet battle robe draped over his shoulders. He had an awe-inspiring and insufferably arrogant posture. He looked down at Embark from above with a cold smile on his face. His voice was as loud as a bell as he shouted, "Lowly commoners, I'm back. This time, the 72 cities will become my clan's territory. No one can stop me. Those who give up resisting can still keep their lowly lives. Those who don't obey will be killed without mercy." And you spoke in human language, and his voice reverberated throughout the entire city. Although his voice was a little clumsy and his accent was a little strange. However, the 1 million martial artists and common people in the city all heard it loud and clear. Instantly, countless cultivators recognized him and cursed angrily. And you saw that the people in the city were agitated. The commoners were shouting in grief and indignation as they cursed him hysterically. Therefore, he raised his right hand expressionlessly and slapped down at the city below. Boom! A blood-red palm the size of a mountain descended from the sky and slammed into the city, causing a loud explosion that shook the world. Instantly, the area within a 15-kilometer radius was blasted into a huge pit. All the houses and buildings in this area were reduced to dust. Almost 100,000 cultivators and commoners were killed on the spot. Not a single complete corpse was left. The entire Embark shook violently. Wide ravines split open around the huge pit. As a result, the previously noisy Embark immediately quietened down. The commoners who were filled with grief and indignation were also silent. They did not dare to make any noise. Chapter 2354. In a short period of an hour, Anbei City had fallen into enemy hands. The city lord and many experts knew that they were powerless to resist. If they angered you, the entire Anbei City would be turned into ashes and all the citizens would die. To Enyu and his large fleet, they only needed to bombard the city twice. In order to protect Anbei City and the 1 million citizens in the city lord and the soldiers chose to surrender. Hence, Enyu sent a battleship into Anbei City to take over the city. The captain of the battleship was a martial god, and there were hundreds of martial sage realm warriors under him. Controlling Anbei City was as easy as flipping one's hand. As for how to control the city, there was no need for Enyu to say anything. The captain and the hundreds of warriors knew what to do. After all, they were the executioners who had conquered the universe and slaughtered the various worlds. They had done this countless times and were very familiar with it. After that, Enyu led 39 battleships out of Anbei City in a grandiose manner and headed towards the next city. The closest city to Anbei City was Tong City. When Enyu had led the demon race army to attack, he had also taken over this city. 10 months had passed, and Tong City had been rebuilt. It had returned to its original state. The citizens in the city had also gradually settled down and were recuperating. However, with the arrival of Enyu and his fleet, disaster struck again. Enyu did not waste any time. When he arrived in the sky above Tong City, he sent out 2 battleships to bombard the city protecting array. With a few earth-shattering explosions, the city protecting array collapsed on the spot. Tens of thousands of houses and close to 100,000 citizens in the city were turned into ashes on the spot. What happened next was self-evident. The entire process was similar to taking over Anbei City. Enyu's powerful force and his fleet's deterrence made the citizens in the city feel despair. No one had any thoughts of resisting and could only surrender. Just like that, the second city fell. The foreign races did not pay any price and did not suffer any casualties. They easily took over the city. Enyu ordered a battleship to stay behind and take control of Tong City. Then, he led the fleet to the next city. Following that, similar scenes repeated themselves. As the fleet continued to head south, one city after another was taken over by the foreign races. Enyu had absolute power, and there was no need for any schemes. Taking over the various cities would be as easy as blowing off dust. Whenever they encountered any resistance, they could simply bombard the city several times with the warship cannons, destroying half of the city and slaughtering hundreds of thousands of civilians. With such brutal means, of course, he was invincible. In a short span of 5 days, and you had taken over 40 cities. On average, each warship occupied a city. Thus, and you temporarily stopped his attack. He ordered the captains to take control of the city as soon as possible and turn it into their base camp. After a total of 4 days, the heaven-destroying tribe's army had completely taken control of 40 cities. And you then gave another order, leaving only 50 soldiers in each city to guard the city. The captains led the remaining warriors to gather at his location. After the fleet was gathered, and you started a new round of expansion and conquest, disaster reappeared. The remaining 30 or so cities quickly fell under the iron hooves of the Heaven Punishers. Another 5 days passed. The 72 cities were completely taken over by you. During this process, at least 10 million civilians have been killed by the warships and the heaven-destroying tribe's warriors. Every city was riddled with holes, leaving behind a scene of desolation. This region had become tragic and austere, and the air was filled with the smell of blood and slaughter. After the 72 cities fell, and you reported the good news to General Dragon, subduing and reported the results of the battle. General Dragon, subduing, was very pleased to learn that there were no casualties among the heaven-destroying tribe's warriors, and he praised in you. He then instructed in you to guard the 72 cities and take complete control of this territory. And you naturally obeyed the order. He had long since planned to lead the army to attack Tianju Mountain after turning the 72 cities into his base camp. He had long wanted to find Ji Tianxing for revenge. Northwest of Shenwu continent, within the borders of Heaven's and Divine Nation. This Divine Nation, which was located between the void and the 5 elements world, had always been calm and full of spirit chi. This Divine Nation was like a small world that was isolated from the rest of the world, an otherworldly residence. No matter what happened on Shenwu continent, this place would not be affected. Early in the morning, warm sunlight shone on the ground, making the Divine Palace even more dazzling and majestic. Suddenly, in a secret chamber in the depths of the Divine Palace, there was a muffled bang. Boom! Following the sound, the entire Divine Palace began to tremble. Immediately after, a dazzling golden pillar of light soared into the sky from within the Divine Palace. The golden pillar was tens of thousands of meters tall and dozens of kilometers thick, and it was extremely dazzling. The pillar of light stood between the heavens and the earth, as if it were connected to the Divine Palace and the heavens. It emitted a sacred and dignified aura. An even more inconceivable scene appeared. 6 dark golden dragon phantoms that were thousands of meters long circled around the pillar of light, emitting earth-shattering dragon roars. Such a frightening vision of heaven and earth immediately alarmed the entire Divine Palace and spread across half of the Divine Kingdom. Within the Divine Palace, there were thousands of guards, maids, and powerhouses, as well as a few divine sons and daughters. Everyone was awakened by the commotion. Everyone looked up at the sky and saw the sacred scene of 6 dragons circling the pillar. They were all shocked and exclaimed in surprise. Heavens, what kind of scene is that? It's actually so sacred and dignified. What a powerful divine force aura. It's like a god has descended. This is a worldly phenomenon, the most sacred and honorable worldly phenomenon. I understand now. It must be the Divine Master's divine art that caused such a shocking scene. Has the Divine Master finally cultivated a divine art and broken through? This is a blessing for the Divine Nation, a blessing for the world. It's been 300 years. Is the Divine Master finally coming out of seclusion? Similar exclamations and discussions could be heard throughout the Divine Palace. Everyone was ecstatic, and their bright eyes were filled with anticipation. The divine sons and daughters were especially proud as they hurried to the secret room where Martial God Tianju was in seclusion. Although Tianju Divine Nation was the leader of the 3 divine nations, it was the most powerful force. However, in recent years, Tianju Divine Nation had suffered many setbacks, and its reputation and power had been constantly weakening. A few months ago, the eldest divine son, Yuan Zhen, Yi Lu Shui, and a few divine emperors have been killed by Ji Tianxing. This matter had spread throughout the world, causing Tianju divine nation's power to plummet, and its reputation was damaged and humiliated. Everyone held their breaths in their hearts. They had endured humiliation for a few months just for this day. Everyone knew that once martial god Tianju cultivated a divine art, he would be able to restore Tianju's divine nation's prestige after coming out of seclusion. Chapter 2355. The 6 dragons winding around the pillar phenomenon lasted for 2 whole hours. When the pillar of light and the golden dragon dissipated, the sky was covered by endless rays of light. The 5-colored light was both real and illusory. It contained a vast and mighty divine power aura that nourished the entire divine kingdom. Thus, the god kingdom was as warm as spring, and hundreds of flowers bloomed. Many warriors and spiritual beasts were baptized by the divine power, and their bodies evolved and transformed. Some warriors and spiritual beasts even broke through bottlenecks and became more powerful. As a result, the divine kingdom was in a state of jubilation. Everyone was cheering excitedly. The 5-colored light lasted for 5 days and 5 nights before disappearing. On the morning of the 6th day, outside a secret room in the depths of the God Palace, 5 warriors wearing luxurious clothes and extraordinary auras stood respectfully in the passage and waited patiently. One of them was a middle-aged man wearing golden armor and had a muscular body. He was Lu Jin, the new commander of the God Army and martial god Tianju's closest confidant. The other 4 warriors were 2 pairs of young men and women. They wore luxurious golden robes and long dresses and wore jewel crowns. These 4 noble young men and women were martial god Tianju's children. Even though their talents and aptitudes were considered 1 in 1,000 martial arts geniuses, compared to Yuan Chong and Yuan Jun, they were overshadowed and ordinary. For so many years, the 4 divine sons and divine daughters had lived comfortably in the God Kingdom and grew up quietly. Now that Yuan Chong and Yuan Jun were dead, only the 4 of them were left. Thus, they felt that their chance had come and wanted to win martial god Tianju's favor when he came out of seclusion. If they could win martial god Tianju's favor, they would receive special training and guidance. In the future, they might be able to reach Yuan Chong and Yuan Jun's heights. Just as everyone had their own thoughts, the door to the secret room opened. Whoosh! As the tall stone door opened to both sides, a dazzling golden light gushed out from the secret chamber. The overwhelming divine power made the 4 divine princes and divine ladies tremble. They found it difficult to breathe and even staggered a little. Only Lu Jin, who was the strongest among them, was barely able to withstand the impact of the divine power and stood still. A tall golden figure walked out of the golden light and arrived at the door of the secret chamber. This was a middle-aged man with a resolute face and a sacred and dignified aura. He had a dignified appearance, and his eyes were as deep as the void. He wore a golden robe with flying dragons and a golden crown with a coiled dragon on his head. It was martial god Tianju. His entire body was shrouded in a faint golden light, which vaguely formed the projection of a golden dragon that was circling around him. Behind him, there was a ball of light mixed with gold and silver, shining brightly. Upon seeing martial god Tianju, Lu Jin and the 4 divine sons and divine daughters bowed respectfully and said in unison, "Welcome back, divine master. Welcome back, Lord Father." Everyone's faces were filled with joy, and their voices were filled with excitement. Martial god Tianju wore a gentle expression, and a gratified smile hung at the corner of his lips. Obviously, he had gained a lot from his seclusion this time. As soon as he came out of seclusion, he saw everyone welcoming him, so he was in an extremely good mood. "Rise, everyone." Martial god Tianju raised his sleeves, indicating for everyone to rise. Lu Jin hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Lord Divine Master, you have cultivated bitterly for 300 years. Now that you have achieved great success, you have triggered the phenomenon of 6 dragons circling the pillar, and the multicolored light has not dissipated for several days. This is a rare phenomenon, and it is an auspicious omen that will bless the world. Lord Divine Master, I have already ordered people to spread the news. Now, the entire Divine Kingdom has received the news. Billions of people are wild with excitement and joy, and they worship you to the extreme. Martial God Tian Ju looked at him deeply and nodded slightly. You have done well, and you have received my approval. In recent years, the situation in Shunwu continent has changed, and the Divine Kingdom has experienced many storms. Now, the people are in a state of panic, and many rumors have been spreading. At this time, the people will know that I have come out of seclusion and that I have achieved great success. This will definitely pacify the people. He then looked at the 4 divine sons and divine daughters and said calmly, "The 4 of you, what are you doing here instead of cultivating in seclusion and increasing your strength?" Among the 4, the slightly older golden-robed youth was the 2nd divine son. He cupped his hands and explained, "Father, you have been cultivating in seclusion for 300 years. Now, you have finally achieved great success and successfully broken through to the 6th stage. This is a joyous occasion. Your son, brothers, and sisters have received this good news, so, of course, we came to welcome you. Father, don't worry. After this matter is over, your son and the rest will go back and cultivate diligently. We will not slack off." Martial God Tianju saw that the 2nd divine son was calm and had the bearing of a general. He felt slightly comforted and nodded. I'm very pleased that you are so filial." The thin youth standing behind the 2nd divine son was the 3rd divine son. He had an indignant expression and said to Martial God Tianju, "Father, while you were cultivating in seclusion, the Luoshui Divine Kingdom and the Boundless Divine Kingdom were very complacent. They forgot about your supreme divine might and dared to compete with our Tianju Divine Kingdom, especially that Ji Tianxing. He was unpardonably evil and had committed a heinous crime. Father, you must kill that bastard with your own hands and tear him into pieces to avenge 4th brother and big brother." Martial God Tian Ju immediately frowned when he heard the 3rd divine son's words. His expression became a little gloomy. The 2nd divine son observed his expression and hurriedly glared at the 3rd divine son. He said in a dignified tone, "3rd brother, today is the joyous day that Father has come out of seclusion. How can you mention this? Father knows clearly what happened before. He must have his own ideas and plans. Why do you need to remind him?" The 3rd divine son was very unhappy when he saw his 2nd brother scolding him. He wanted to refute. Martial God Tianju waved his hand to stop him and said with a cold expression, "3rd brother is right. Luo Shui and Boundless Divine Kingdom are a little complacent and have forgotten the lesson I taught them. However, the one who deserves to die 10,000 deaths, and the one I hate the most, is Ji Tianxing. Not only did he kill Yuan Zhen and Yuan Chong, but he also killed Yi Lushui, Qin Zheng, and a few divine emperors. He caused the decline of the martial saints in our country. If I don't crush Ji Tianxing's bones and scatter his ashes, how can I let it go?" The 2nd divine son nodded to show his agreement and said with a worried expression, "Father, of course, we must make him pay 100-fold for such a deep blood feud. However, everyone knows that martial god Luo Shui is protecting Ji Tianxing in every possible way. If you kill Ji Tianxing personally, martial god Luo Shui will definitely stop you. At that time, you will inevitably have a great battle with her. The 2 divine kingdoms will probably go to war because of this." Martial god Tianju sneered and said in a cold voice, "So what? I have already sworn that I will kill Ji Tianxing no matter what. Even the heavens can't save him." Chapter 2356. Martial god Tianju's tone was overbearing and tyrannical. Lu Jin, the 4 godsons, and the goddesses were all intimidated by his domineering aura. Everyone was filled with respect. Their hearts were filled with awe, and there was also a trace of anticipation. Lu Jin was the best at figuring out the intentions of his superiors, so he quickly echoed, "Ji Tianxing has committed a heinous crime. Of course, he will die without a doubt. Even if martial god Luo Shui wants to protect him, it's useless. If he angers the Master God, he'll kill her as well. Anyway, the Master God has already mastered his divine arts and is now the absolute leader of the three martial gods. No one in the entire Shenwu continent is your match. The second godson nodded in agreement and said expectantly, if Father kills Luo Shui, then the vast territory of Luo Shui, Divine Kingdom, will belong to our country. If that's the case, Father won't be far from unifying the entire Shenwu continent. The other three godsons and goddesses also praised martial god Tianju, praising him to the skies. After a long while, everyone quieted down. Martial god Tianju said with a dignified expression, you all can leave first. I've just come out of seclusion and have many matters to attend to. Now that the Shenwu Divine Kingdom's talents have withered, there are many things that I need to do personally. The second and third godsons took the opportunity to step forward at the same time. They cupped their hands and bowed. Your sons are willing to share your worries and solve your problems, Father. Martial god Tianju glanced at them and said indifferently, well, Yuan Zhen and Yuan Chong are no longer here. You should grow up and strive to be independent as soon as possible. From now on, the two of you will follow Lu Jin and learn how to manage the Shenwu Divine Kingdom's affairs. The two godsons were overjoyed and quickly bowed to express their gratitude to martial god Tianju. Martial god Tianju did not waste any more time and stepped through the passage to the study. Lu Jin and the other godsons and goddesses also left one after another, each busy with their own affairs. Over the next few days, martial god Tianju stayed in the palace, reviewing the mountain of memorials and letters and managing the Shenwu Divine Kingdom's affairs. The two godsons also followed Lu Jin, learning how to manage the kingdom's affairs while using their own schemes and methods to fight for power. Unknowingly, 8 days had passed. Martial god Tianju had finally finished handling the kingdom's affairs. For a long time in the future, the heaven and divine nation would be at peace. He didn't need to worry about it. On the morning of the 9th day, he left the divine kingdom alone and rushed towards the pillar of heaven's mountains. This time, he wanted to personally kill his way to Tianju Mountain and behead Ji Tianxing. With his strength at LV6 martial god realm and the power of the three divine weapons, killing Ji Tianxing would be a piece of cake. No one could stop him. Meanwhile, at the peak of the pillar of heaven's mountains, a few days ago, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao ended their closed-door training. However, the two of them cultivated for a few more days in the secret chamber to consolidate their martial arts foundation. After a few months of bitter cultivation, their strength had increased greatly, and their battle prowess had soared by many times. Ji Tianxing had long reached the rank 7 martial sage realm. Now that his powers were vigorous and his foundation was solid, he was not far from the rank 8 martial sage realm. Not only had Yun Yao recovered from her injuries, but she had also refined the shadowless dual swords and the godly armor. Moreover, her strength had also broken through, and she had successfully reached the rank 7 martial sage realm. When the sun rose, the couple ended their cultivation at the same time and opened their eyes. The two of them looked at each other and left the secret chamber at the same time. We have been in closed-door training for so long. I wonder if there have been any changes in the pillar of heaven's mountains? It has only been a few months. Even if there had been any changes, it would not have been much. The two of them talked softly as they walked towards the room where they were staying. At that moment, a guard at the entrance of the passageway suddenly stopped the two of them. The guard knelt down respectfully and reported, "Welcome, young Master Ji and Madam Ji. The Yellow Dragon Grand Deity has instructed me that he has urgent news to report to young Master Ji immediately. Please wait for a moment, young Master Ji. I will inform the Grand Deity now." Upon hearing the news, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and said solemnly, "Urgent news? There is no need to inform him. I will look for him now." After saying that, Ji Tianxing quickly left with Yun Yao and rushed towards the Huanglong Daoist study room. In the elegant and quiet study room, the Huanglong Daoist was sitting in front of the study table. He held a memorial in his hands and stared at it intently. His expression was a little ugly. He stared at the memorial for a long time without moving his gaze away. His white brows furrowed tightly, and there was a look of worry between his brows. Upon seeing this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao stepped into the study room and asked, Huanglong, what happened? The Huanglong Taoist, who was deep in thought, was instantly awakened. He immediately regained his senses and hurriedly stood up and bowed respectfully. He said respectfully, Disciple Huanglong welcomes Master and Madam Ji. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said sternly, There is no need to be so polite. Let's talk about serious matters first. Is the pillar of heaven's mountains in danger? Why are you so worried? The Huanglong Taoist shook his head and then nodded. He said in a low voice, Master, just 10 days ago, I received news from the scouts. And you has appeared again. He led a large group of strange-looking black battleships into the 72 cities and started a massacre in each of the cities. In just a few days, and you led the mutated tribe experts to invade more than 40 cities. Now, the remaining 30 cities have fallen into Yu's hands. The sudden news made Ji Tianxing's expression change. He furrowed his brows tightly. And Yu has made a comeback? He even brought a large group of black battleships with him? The Huanglong Taoist nodded and said solemnly, That's right. The scouts at the front line saw it with their own eyes. There is no falsehood. Master, and Yu is a martial god expert. He is very powerful. Now, he has brought so many battleships and villains with him, and he has quickly taken over the 72 cities. This news has already spread throughout the Shenwu continent, and everyone knows about it now. Master, if I may be so bold as to guess, and Yu definitely wants to take over the 72 cities and turn them into his own territory. Their next target will definitely be our pillar of heaven's mountains. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao suddenly understood. No wonder the Huanglong Taoist looked so worried. Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment and guessed the reason. He could not help but reveal a face full of hatred and killing intent. That damn Yu. We were all deceived by him. That sinister and despicable bastard. No wonder he has been so low-key for the past few months. It turns out that he has been lying in wait. Aside from him and his black armor guards, there is also the Heaven Punisher's fleet in outer space. If I am not wrong, he must have discovered the Five Elements world by chance. Since he could not take over it, he must have sent a message to the fleet. Now, a large group of battleships and powerhouses from the Heaven Punishers have arrived at the Five-Element world. With their strength, they're naturally invincible. Against a power like the 72 cities, they can easily destroy them. Chapter 2357. Back when Yu had led the Black Armored Guards on a killing spree, Ji Tianxing had been worried about whether Yu had reinforcements or helpers. However, in the following year, no new foreign race powerhouses appeared. Ji Tianxing dispelled this worry. He only wanted to increase his strength as quickly as possible so that he could kill Yu as soon as possible and get rid of this scourge. However, he had just come out of seclusion when he heard this bad news. It was only now that he realized that Yu had reinforcements and that there were quite a few of them. Huanglong, how many warships does Yu have in total? Ji Tianxing looked at Huanglong Taoist with a serious expression and asked in a deep voice. Huanglong Taoist thought for a moment and replied uncertainly, Our scouts don't dare to get close to the fleet. They can only observe from afar and gather information from the commoners. According to the scouts, there are no less than 30 warships, but there shouldn't be more than 50 of them either. When he heard this, Ji Tianxing's pupils shrank, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. All of a sudden, there are so many battleships? According to the personnel of Yu's warship, each warship has a martial god captain and over 100 martial sage warriors and guards. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that he has 3,000 to 4,000 martial sages and over 30 martial gods? Hiss! Huanglong Taoist was stunned on the spot. His body stiffened, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Yun Yao's body also trembled, and her expression became extremely serious. She muttered to herself, 3,000 to 4,000 martial sages and over 30 martial gods? That's 10 times the number of powerhouses on Shinwu continent. This is too exaggerated. When she thought of this, she looked at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze and asked, Tianxing, could you have made a mistake in your estimation? If Yu really has such a powerful force, then not only would he be able to flatten Shinwu continent, but he would also be able to rule the entire Five Elements realm. Ji Tianxing nodded and replied with a cold expression. I also hope that I have overestimated them. Otherwise, the Five Elements world will welcome a calamity of destruction. Huanglong Taoist finally recovered from the shock and asked worriedly, Master, 72 cities have fallen, and it is said that they have become the headquarters of the alien race. We are the closest to the 72 cities, and we could be invaded at any time. Over the past few days, the disciples had sent out most of their men to the northern region to defend with all their might. What else do we need to do? Ji Tianxing weighed the pros and cons and waved his hand. If Yu really leads the fleet to attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, those ordinary martial artists will not be of any use. They will all become cannon fodder. The best defense is actually offense. Yin Yao had already guessed his intention. She nodded and said, You mean, instead of waiting for death, why don't we take the initiative to attack? Just like last time, we will sneak into the 72 cities and assassinate the experts under Yu's command. We will weaken his forces as much as possible. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, That's right, that's right. In addition to assassinating non-humankind experts, we also need to gather information. We need to know the actual situation of Yu, how many battleships, and how many martial sages he has under his command. Huanglong Taoist quickly advised, Master, when you and your wife sneaked into the 72 cities to assassinate Yu and his warriors, I did not object. That was because the situation at that time was not too bad. However, today is different, and Yu's forces are too terrifying. If you go there recklessly, you will be like a lamb in a tiger's den. Ji Tianxing looked at him calmly and asked, If we don't take the initiative to attack, what else can we do? Wait for death? Or run away? This, Huanglong Taoist fell silent and did not know how to answer. It was impossible for them to wait for death. It was even more impossible for them to run away. The mighty Kenshin had not even seen the alien race's fleet. They had only heard that the 72 cities had fallen, and they had already run away in fear. This was the biggest joke in the world. Seeing that Huanglong Taoist was no longer trying to persuade him, Ji Tianxing said in a dignified tone, Huanglong, now that the alien race has invaded, Shinwu continent will definitely fall into chaos. We need to be fully prepared. Master and your wife will work together to sneak into the 72 cities to gather information and assassinate non-humankind powerhouses. You will stay at Tianzhu Mountain and gather as many disciples as possible. Tidy up the treasury and cultivation resources. Perhaps we will really have to give up on Tianzhu Mountain soon. Huanglong Taoist was stunned and revealed an expression of disbelief. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Master, the situation shouldn't be that bad, right? Ji Tianxing did not answer. Huanglong Taoist's heart grew heavier, and he did not say anything else. He bowed and said, Master, I understand what to do. Ji Tianxing nodded and left the study with Yun Yao. The two returned to their residence and packed up their things, preparing to head to the 72 cities. An hour later, the two of them were ready and left the Pillar of Heaven Palace together. However, the two stepped into the training hall and were about to fly up into the sky. A crack suddenly appeared in the sky above the training hall, and a dazzling icy blue light shone from it. In the next moment, a slim and graceful figure walked out of the crack. This graceful and beautiful woman with a noble and holy aura was martial god Luo Shui. She stepped across the sky and landed in front of Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. When the two saw her, they hurriedly greeted her. Greetings, Divine Master. Greetings, Divine Master Luo Shui. After bowing, Yun Yao took the initiative to ask, Divine Master, weren't you cultivating in your divine kingdom? Why have you suddenly come to Tianzhu Mountain? Ji Tianxing did not speak, but he looked at Luo Shui with a puzzled expression. Luo Shui's clear eyes revealed a serious expression, and she said in a low voice, I have indeed been cultivating in my divine kingdom for the past few months. However, 8 days ago, I suddenly sensed a strange phenomenon in the Tianju divine kingdom. In less than 2 days, news came from the Tianju divine kingdom. That guy has indeed come out of seclusion. Moreover, he has already mastered the revolving star passage divine technique, and his strength has increased by another level. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were stunned when they heard the news. The two looked at each other, and their expressions became serious. Martial God Tianju has come out of seclusion? He has indeed mastered the divine technique, and he has increased by another level. Ji Tianxing frowned and murmured with a worried expression. Blessings never come in pairs, and misfortunes never come singly. I just heard bad news, and now there is bad news. He knew very well what it meant for martial god Tianju to come out of seclusion. Yun Yao suppressed her worries and bowed to Luo Shui, saying, Thank you for the reminder, Divine Master. We will be extra careful and be on guard against martial god Tianju's revenge. Luo Shui shook her head calmly and said in a low voice, No need to be on guard. Yun Yao was stunned and asked in confusion, What do you mean? Chapter 2358. Yun Yao's expression changed when she heard Luo Shui's words. Ji Tianxing also looked up at the sky in the west. His expression was as cold as ice. He also sensed a sacred aura rapidly approaching from the sky, 30,000 zhang above the ground. In the next moment, the calm sky suddenly shattered. Crack! A huge crack appeared in the sky. Dazzling golden light surged out from the crack. It was like the sun illuminating the world. Swoosh! A tall and burly figure stepped out from the crack. It was a man in a golden robe who was thousands of feet tall. He was as huge as a mountain. He looked majestic. His eyes were like lightning. 6 golden dragon shadows surrounded his body. He exuded the domineering aura of a king. He crossed dozens of miles in one step. In just 3 steps, he arrived at the peak of Sky Pillar Mountain and stood above the dojo. He looked down at Sky Pillar Mountain from above. His gaze locked onto Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Luo Shui on the dojo. Hee, Luo Shui, I expected that you would protect Ji Tianxing with your life. I didn't expect that I would be right. I haven't arrived yet, and you've arrived first. The golden-robed giant smirked. He sneered in a mocking tone. Luo Shui looked up at him and said expressionlessly, Tianju, ever since I came out of seclusion, I've set up a few formations to monitor your movements. I know exactly when you come out of seclusion and when you leave the kingdom. I know exactly what you want to do. How can I let you do as you wish? Martial god Tianju nodded and said with a sinister smile, I see. No wonder you could grasp my movements and arrive here in advance. However, it's useless even if you're here. You know very well that I must kill Ji Tianxing today. No one can stop me. Since we've known each other for 3,000 years, I'll give you one last chance. This is a grudge between me and Ji Tianxing. It's none of your business. Leave now, and I'll let bygones be bygones. Not only did Luo Shui not back down, he stepped into the sky, his right hand wielding the reverse water sword. She looked at martial god Tianxing fearlessly and sneered, You should know that no matter what, I will not sit by and watch you deal with Tianxing. If you want to kill him, you'll have to step over my dead body. Martial god Tianju frowned. He was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He shouted angrily, Luo Shui, if you're so stubborn, don't blame me for being merciless. Luo Shui revealed a cold smirk as he spoke out in a playful tone. You've merely broken through to the 6th-stage realm, and it actually made you so arrogant and conceited. Do you think that you can easily defeat me just because your cultivation level is higher than mine? Today, it's still unknown who will live and who will die. Martial god Tianju's face was filled with anger as he shouted in a thunderous voice, Since you don't believe me, I will show you. As soon as his voice fell, he suddenly raised his fists and blasted out 2 fists as fast as lightning. The mountain-sized golden fist glows were like 2 suns descending from the sky as they smashed towards the Luo Shui. The dazzling golden light and scorching aura immediately enveloped the entire pillar of Heaven's Mountain. Luo Shui was fearless. His left hand formed a sword gesture while his right hand waved the reverse water sword as he faced the attack head-on. Virtuous as water, the reverse water sword released an icy blue brilliance that shot up to the sky as it instantly slashed out 36 icy blue sword glows towards the two golden fist shadows. The fist glows and sword glows collided, and instantly there was a loud boom, boom, boom. Both of them collapsed at the same time, turning into light fragments that covered the sky and earth as they burst out in all directions. The deafening loud sound reverberated through a radius of 3,000 miles as it shook the surrounding mountains and rivers. The extremely violent shock wave hit the pillar of Heaven's Mountain, causing the 10,000 feet tall mountain to shake as numerous crushed stones collapsed. The ground around the pillar of Heaven's Mountain trembled violently as densely packed ravines were formed. Dozens of mountain peaks cracked or collapsed from the tremors, turning into ruins. Even if it was just the aftermath of a battle between martial god experts, it was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Luckily, the pillar of Heaven's Mountain was protected by the heavenly dome array. A colorful light barrier enveloped the entire mountain peak. There were also 108 mountain peaks that formed the Big Dipper star Luo and the Earth Fiend Spirit Prey array that also protected the pillar of Heaven's Mountain. The destructive shock wave was blocked by the protective mountain array and was quickly absorbed and dissolved. However, such an earth-shattering commotion still alarmed everyone in the pillar of Heaven's Mountain. Countless disciples were shocked as they ran out in a panic to see what had happened. Even Huang Long and a few elders flew to the dojo as they looked at martial god Tianju in the sky. Ji Qianxing immediately gave an order to Huang Long as he shouted in a dignified tone, "Huang Long, quickly gather the elders, deacons, and disciples to jointly maintain the protective mountain array. No matter what, we must protect the foundation of the pillar of Heaven's Mountain." Huang Long acknowledged the order and hurriedly passed down the order to quickly assign tasks. After a while, he and a few elders were separated and arranged in a formation on the dojo. The deacons and disciples were also divided into 9 groups and stood separately on the dojo. Everyone was focused on channeling their arts to inject majestic energy into the heavenly dome array to increase the power of the protective mountain array. Naturally, the effect was immediate. The colorful light barrier that enveloped the entire mountain peak suddenly became dazzling and almost doubled in thickness. At this time, Luo Shui rushed up to the sky again and waved her sword at martial god Tianju. "I thought you had really improved by leaps and bounds after you had mastered the divine skill. The result is so disappointing." Martial god Tianju was infuriated by her. With a hideous smile, he took out a huge sword that could split the heavens. His body emitted a golden light that shot into the sky and formed a pair of huge wings. That was just the appetizer. Now it's the real beginning. As he spoke, martial god Tianju held the huge sword with both hands and slashed down a sword light that was tens of thousands of feet long. Before the sword light arrived, the destructive and violent sword intent and invisible divine aura had already enveloped a radius of 1,000 miles. Luo Shui's expression was solemn as her body turned into a ball of icy blue light and instantly stabbed out 365 rays of icy blue sword light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The icy blue sword light blotted out the sky and bloomed in the sky. It was as dazzling as a fairy scattering flowers. Bam, bam, bam. The huge golden sword that could split the heavens and earth slashed down and instantly shattered countless icy blue sword light, creating a loud explosion that shook the universe. In the blink of an eye, the icy blue sword light that filled the sky was destroyed. There were only 40 or so rays of sword light left. Just as they were about to hit martial god Tianju, he waved his left hand and created a golden and silver vortex. Stellar transposition. As martial god Tianju roared angrily, The vortex swallowed the icy blue sword light and disappeared without a trace. Luo Shui's ultimate sword technique had been easily neutralized by him. At the same time, the huge golden sword that could split the heavens and earth slashed down on Luo Shui. Bam! Although the power of the huge sword had been weakened by 70%. Luo Shui also used the reverse water divine sword to block the attack of the huge sword. Chapter 23:59. Bam! The Luo River slammed into the five-colored light barrier, creating a loud explosion. The protective array within a few hundred miles shook violently, creating layers of ripples. However, she had neutralized the powerful impact and was not injured. At this moment, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao also rushed into the sky and attacked martial god Tianju together. If the heavens want to destroy a man, they must first make him mad. Tianju, you are not far from death. Ji Tianxing's face was cold as he shouted in a low voice. He formed a sword seal with his left hand and waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, creating a sky full of cold stars. Yin Yao put on her divine armor and was covered in dark golden armor. She held the shadowless sword with both hands and slashed out sword shadows with all her might. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Hundreds of starry sword lights flashed in the sky and charged at martial god Tianju without any form or trace. Seeing this, martial god Tianju smirked and sneered. This is the divine weapon you obtained in the illusory void secret realm? Ha ha! That was originally mine, and it will be returned to its rightful owner soon. As he spoke, his left palm struck out with a profound technique, forming a seal that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. Whoosh! A golden and silver hurricane with a radius of 100 miles instantly appeared in front of him. Ji Tianxing's sword lights and Yun Yao's shadowless sword were blocked by the hurricane. All the sword lights were swallowed by the hurricane and shattered into a torrent of stars. In the next moment, a torrent of stars surged out of martial god Tianju's right hand. With the enhancement of the divine sword, it turned into 12 giant starry swords and slashed down. He did not use his divine power at all. Instead, he used Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's power to deal with them. This was one of the effects of the stellar shift. Borrowing power to fight power. Give them a taste of their own medicine, and give them a taste of their own medicine. Bam! 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 Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao couldn't dodge in time, and were struck by the two stellar swords on the spot, flying backward. Yun Yao was protected by the godly armor, so she was safe. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, could only use his sword body to resist the attack. A long and narrow wound was left on his chest, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. However, he didn't care about his injuries at all. He immediately soared into the sky and charged towards martial god Tianju. Celestial dragon tyrant body. He let out an angry roar as his entire body emitted a dazzling golden light. In an instant, he turned into a 300-meter tall giant. The burial of heaven sword also grew to 80 zhang long. It was like a giant blade that could split the heavens as it slashed at martial god Tianju. Luo Shui and Yun Yao also flew into the sky and attacked from both sides. The three of them joined forces to besiege martial god Tianju. Sword lights filled the sky and drowned martial god Tianju. However, martial god Tianju laughed disdainfully. His figure flashed, and he entered the 1,000-feet-tall astral hurricane. Bam! 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 Hundreds of icy blue, golden, and silver sword lights slashed the gold and silver astral hurricane, causing a loud explosion. However, all of the sword lights were shattered by the hurricane and merged into a 5-colored astral torrent. Martial god Tianju's left palm made a circle and slapped. He split the astral torrent into 3 light pillars and blasted them at Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao respectively. The three of them quickly retreated and defended with all their might. Ji Tianxing held the burial of heaven's sword and slashed out with all his might. Yun Yao also waved her shadowless dual swords and stabbed out a cold starlight sword light. Luo Shui's left palm struck out an icy blue light pillar, while his right hand swung his sword continuously. Boom, 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 boom. The three five-colored light pillars were shattered into pieces. The five-colored light shards that covered the sky rained down like a storm, covering 1,000 miles. The deafening sound reverberated between heaven and earth. It could be heard from thousands of miles away. The violent shockwave crazily struck the sky and earth. The pillar of heaven's mountains was on the verge of collapsing. Cracks appeared on the mountain, and countless rocks collapsed. The five-colored light barrier also vibrated violently. It was distorted by the shockwave and could break at any time. Huanglong Daoist, many elders, deacons, and disciples were enduring unprecedented pressure. They gritted their teeth and held on. Everyone sat on the training ground with their backs bent. Their faces were as white as paper, and they were sweating profusely. Blood flowed out of their mouths and noses. Everyone's nerves were taut as they used all their strength. After all, this was a battle of life and death for the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. The enemy that the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains was facing was the strongest of the three kingdoms. Martial God Tianju, Sky-breaking sword, moon-breaking sword, God-slaying sword. Ji Tianqing roared furiously. He kept waving his sword and using his killer moves to attack martial god Tianju. However, he kept the god-slaying flying dagger and did not use it. This was his biggest trump card. He would not use it unless it was a critical moment. Yin Yao also teleported in the sky. She used the shadowless sword to slash out invisible sword lights. She tried her best to assassinate martial god Tianju. Luo Shui used all her skills. She used palm techniques, fist techniques, and sword techniques. She also used sword formations and movement techniques. She tried her best to hold martial god Tianju back. Her strength was not far from martial god Tianju's. In a head-on battle, she would only be defeated after at least 10,000 moves. With Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao assisting from the side, the three of them gave martial god Tianju a lot of pressure. If martial god Tianju had not cultivated the revolving star passage divine technique and could use the power of others, he would have been defeated by the three of them. The two sides fought fiercely in the sky. Gradually, the battlefield shifted to the north. After 15 minutes, the two sides had exchanged more than 1,000 moves. They were finally far away from the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. Only then did the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, which was on the verge of collapse, gradually calm down. The towering and majestic mountain was already riddled with scars, filled with ravines and cracks. The mountain protection formation that enveloped the peak of the mountain had dimmed. It was so thin that it was almost transparent. The thousands of disciples and deacons finally relaxed, revealing expressions of relief. Everyone fell to the ground. Their clothes were drenched in sweat. Their faces were pale as they panted heavily. In that short 15 minutes, they had used up almost all of their dermic powers. Even Huang Long and the other elders, who were the most powerful among them, were in a similar predicament. Not only were their hair disheveled, but they were also covered in sweat. There were also bloodstains on their faces. Soon, an hour had passed. Ji Tianqing, Yin Yao, and Luo Shui gradually gained the upper hand. They forced martial god Tianju to retreat. At this moment, the two sides had exchanged more than 10,000 moves. They had used up more than half of their strength. Martial god Tianju was also covered in wounds. He was in a sorry state. His golden robe had become a pile of rags. His long hair was draped over his shoulders. There were more than a dozen wounds on his chest and back. Luo Shui was also heavily injured. Not only was he in a sorry state, but there were also bloodstains at the corner of his mouth. There were at least 9 wounds on his body. Ji Tianqing's injuries were similar to hers. His arms, legs, and back were all bloody. Only Yun Yao's injuries were the lightest. Other than her internal organs being injured and bloodstains at the corner of her mouth, she was not injured at all. Chapter 2360. On the surface, it seemed that Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and Luo Shui had the upper hand. However, in actual fact, both sides were evenly matched, and no one had the upper hand. Luo Shui was a rank 5 martial god and was only one rank lower than martial god Tianju. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were the most powerful among the martial sages. Both of them were gifted and had mastered powerful secret skills. They were also equipped with middle sacred weapons, and their combat powers were comparable to rank 1 or 2 martial gods. It was as if martial god Tianju was being attacked by 3 martial gods. Fortunately, he had mastered the revolving star technique and was able to neutralize most of the attacks. Otherwise, he would have been defeated by the 3 of them. How could he have lasted until now? Damn bastards. They are only martial sages. How can their combat powers be so powerful? Martial god Tianju roared in his heart as he defended against the attacks of the 3. Back then, Kenshin was at the top of the mainland, and no one was his match. At that time, martial god Tianju was jealous and dissatisfied. He was hostile toward Kenshin. However, he knew that he was no match for Kenshin, and he had endured it. He did not show any goodwill toward Kenshin, nor did he dare to provoke him. Now, Kenshin had reincarnated. As a martial sage, he had stirred up the entire mainland and fought with martial god Tianju for so long. No matter how dissatisfied martial god Tianju was, he had to admit that Kenshin was a rare genius. This man has already grown to such a stage. If he recovers to the martial god realm, won't he be invincible again? No. Even if I am severely injured, I must kill him and eliminate all future troubles. Martial god Tianju thought to himself. He had made up his mind to kill Ji Tianxing no matter what. Heaven's domination. He suddenly let out a roar, and golden light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth gushed out from his body, merging into the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles. At the same time, he held the heaven-splitting sword tightly and slashed out 3 rays of golden sword radiance that were 1,000 feet long. Instantly, the entire area within a radius of a few thousand kilometers was illuminated by the blinding golden light. A peerlessly terrifying divine might of heaven and earth enveloped the entire area, ruthlessly suppressing Ji Tianxing. He was suppressed until he bent down. His face was pale, and he broke out in cold sweat. It was difficult for him to move his feet, let alone escape. At that moment of life and death, a thought flashed across Ji Tianxing's mind. Tianju is a bastard. He actually didn't care about Luo Shui and Yao Yao's siege and risked his life to kill me. In just an instant, he made up his mind and used his ultimate life-saving skill. Secret skill. As he let out a low shout, his body instantly disappeared, blending into the world within a radius of 1,500 miles. Within this area, the sky, the earth, the mountains, and the ruins had all become one with him. Tianju was everywhere. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. Tianju. He heavens and heaven and earth. He was the heavens. Instantly, an earth-shattering noise exploded, shaking the heavens and spreading for thousands of miles. 3 deep chase-like chasms were created on the vast earth, hundreds of miles long and tens of thousands of feet deep. Endless dust burst out, covering the sky and the sun. Countless gullies appeared around the abyss, and the ground within a radius of 3,000 miles began to tremble as if a super earthquake had occurred. This area was completely destroyed. All the mountains and forests were destroyed by the shock wave and turned into ruins. The scene of destruction was like the punishment of the gods and the punishment of the heavenly Tao. Even though Ji Tianxing had merged with 1,500 li of heaven and earth to block martial god Tianju's attack, Ji Tianxing still hadn't recovered from the shock. However, close to 1,000 miles of heaven and earth had been destroyed into ruins. Under such terrifying power, he was also heavily injured. His internal organs ruptured and blood gushed out. Blood gushed out from his nose and mouth. His entire chest caved in, and dozens of bones in his body were broken. It was as if an ordinary person had been trampled by an elephant. Fortunately, martial god Tianju's ultimate killer move only destroyed close to 1,000 li of land. If he could destroy 2,000 miles in one strike, Ji Tianqing's corporeal body would be destroyed, and his divine soul would be severely injured. At the same time, Luo Shui and Yun Yao's attacks also hit martial god Tianju. Seeing that martial god Tianju was determined to kill Ji Tianqing without caring about anything, the two of them were anxious. Luo Shui's heart was burning with worry. She used all her divine power and used her ultimate killer move. All water has its source, heaven and earth has its truth. Divine power, 1,000 transformations, sword of true self. She shouted expressionlessly. Her body and divine soul turned into an icy blue light and merged with the reverse water divine sword. The reverse water divine sword turned into 1,000 feet long ice crystal sword. It carried supreme divine power and slashed at martial god Tianju, who was as big as a mountain. Yin Yao was worried about Ji Tianqing's safety. She also used all her power without holding back. Holding the shadowless dual swords, she used her most powerful ultimate move. A cold light covers heaven and earth. Two sleeves light shakes the starry sky. As she shouted angrily, her body ignited with silver starlight that shot into the sky like a bright moon. The shadowless dual swords stabbed out two silver starlight ribbons and pierced martial god Tianju's chest. Bam! 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 A deafening sound exploded in the sky and reverberated throughout the universe. The sword of true self, formed by Luo Shui, slashed martial god Tianju's left shoulder. Golden light flashed and blood splattered across the sky. Martial god Tianju's broad shoulder was cut off by the sword of true self. The wound was very smooth, revealing the pale, golden divine bone. Dark red blood flowed out. His thick and sturdy left arm was sent flying far away, falling from the sky. Almost at the same time, Yin Yao's two starlight ribbons pierced martial god Tianju's chest. Poof! His broad and sturdy chest was pierced with two large bloody holes that went through the front and back of his body. Through the hideous wound, the internal organs and bones in the chest could be clearly seen. Unfortunately, the wounds were slightly off. Otherwise, martial god Tianju's heart would have been shattered. Dark red blood poured out of the wounds like a tide. The violent impact sent martial god Tianju flying and crashing into the ruins hundreds of miles away. The heart-wrenching pain made his body twitch, and he let out an earth-shattering roar. "Ah, you two bitches! I swear I will tear you into pieces and burn your bones to ashes." He struggled furiously. He used his chi to shake off the dirt and rocks on his body and climbed out of the ruins. Heavily injured, he was like an enraged beast that had completely lost his mind. He held the sky-splitting sword with both hands and charged at Luo Shui recklessly, slashing down. Luo Shui and Yun Yao's expressions changed, and they hurriedly used their techniques to block. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, who was also heavily injured, silently appeared behind martial god Tianju. His clothes were ragged and his hair was disheveled. His white robe had turned dark red, and his injuries were extremely miserable. Chapter 2361. Whoosh! The golden light flashed high in the sky and disappeared in a flash. The 3-inch golden knife was the god-slaying flying knife. Ji Tianqing had not used it since the start of the battle. Now, the god-slaying flying knife had shown its power. Martial god Tianju was charging toward Luo Shui in a frenzy. He was not prepared for Ji Tianqing's sudden appearance and sneak attack from behind with a flying knife. Wei sensed that something was wrong, and a chill of death rose from the bottom of his heart. It was too late. Bam! He was about to teleport away when he heard a muffled sound from behind him. Then, a heart-wrenching pain spread from his chest to his brain. From the corner of his eye, he saw a ray of dark golden divine light shoot out from his chest and disappear in an instant. The violent impact caused his body to shake violently. He staggered a few steps forward before he stopped. He stood stiffly in the sky and slowly looked down at his chest. A third bloody hole appeared in his chest, which was already badly mutilated. This bloody hole was smaller than the previous two, but it was fatal. The bloody hole was where his heart was supposed to be. Now, his heart had disappeared. Only a dozen pieces of broken flesh were left. His heart had actually been blasted apart by that golden light. Martial god Tian Ju immediately realized that after his heart was destroyed, his blood had stopped flowing. The life force of his physical body was also flowing away rapidly like a flood. He slowly turned around and looked at Ji Tianxing with a face full of shock. His eyes were filled with intense resentment. Ji, God, fine. You actually... He roared in disbelief. His voice was hoarse and deep. As he spoke, blood spurted out from his nose and mouth. He could not accept this result at all. Ji Tianxing, who was only a martial saint, had destroyed his heart and destroyed his divine body that he had cultivated for thousands of years. Ji Tianxing stood in the sky, tens of thousands of feet away from him. He looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "You, say your last words." The cold and emotionless words were like a great humiliation. They made martial god Tian Ju go crazy. "No, I'm the strongest person in the continent. How can I be defeated? So what if my physical body is destroyed? You want to kill me? You must be dreaming." Martial god Tian Ju roared hysterically. His body was engulfed in golden flames that soared into the sky. He crazily waved his left palm, shooting out a gold and silver light that blotted out the sky, blasting towards Ji Tianxing. He brandished the heaven-splitting greatsword with his right hand and recklessly slashed out hundreds of sword lights towards Yun Yao and Luo Shui. Even if his heart was shattered, his body could still hold on for a short period of time. This was the strength of a martial god expert. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and Luo Shui hurriedly cast spells to block martial god Tian Ju's fierce attacks. Pung pung pung. The sword lights that were as dense as rain collided with each other with a loud bang, causing an earth-shaking explosion. The gold and silver light transformed into a 100-mile-wide whirlpool, trying to devour Ji Tianxing and shred him into pieces. Ji Tianxing had no choice but to retreat quickly. He repeatedly slashed out the starry sword light in an attempt to destroy the vortex. Taking advantage of the opportunity, martial god Tianjue executed a secret technique to break open the sky before him. Swoosh! A 1,000-foot-long gap appeared in the sky, connecting to the alternate dimension. I will return the pain I suffered today 100-fold sooner or later. Martial god Tianjue's eyes were bloodshot. He glared viciously at Ji Tianxing and Luo Shui as he said those words. Then he stepped into the gap without hesitation and disappeared in a flash. After a breath's time, Luo Shui and Yun Yao destroyed the sword lights in the sky and rushed over as fast as lightning. However, the gap had already healed. Martial god Tianjue had escaped into the alternate dimension and was already far away from this place. No one knew where he was. Luo Shui was about to cast a spell to break open the sky and chase after martial god Tianjue. At this moment, Ji Tianxing finally dispelled the starry whirlpool. He hurriedly shouted, "Luo Shui, don't chase after them." Hearing his shout, Luo Shui hurriedly stopped casting and turned to look at him. "Tianxing, why don't you chase after them?" Yin Yao also looked at him with concern and checked his injuries. Ji Tianxing's injuries were extremely miserable. His spiritual power and divine soul aura were also very weak. He had relied on his strong willpower to hold on until now and release the god-slaying flying dagger. Now, martial god Tianjue had escaped with serious injuries. He relaxed his mind and could no longer hold on. His body was on the verge of collapse, and his consciousness became blurry. "Tianxing!" Yin Yao let out a worried cry. Her figure flashed and teleported to his side. She hurriedly hugged him. Luo Shui also flew over and released a wisp of divine sense to envelop him and check his injuries. A moment later, Luo Shui furrowed her brows and her eyes became very serious. His injuries are so serious. Not only was his physical body almost destroyed, but his divine soul was also almost destroyed. Hearing her say this, Yin Yao's heart burned with worry, and she was extremely anxious. Divine Master, let's quickly return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and think of a way to save Tianxing, shall we? Luo Shui nodded solemnly and hurriedly flew back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains with Yun Yao. 100 breaths later, Luo Shui and Yun Yao returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains together. Yun Yao carried the unconscious Ji Tianxing in her arms. On the dojo at the peak of the mountain, thousands of disciples were meditating and recuperating from their injuries. Everyone looked very haggard and anxious. Their hearts were in their throats. When they saw Luo Shui and Yun Yao return, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and smiled with relief. Even though the two of them had suffered heavy injuries and looked very miserable, Lin Mingya could not help but laugh. Their safe return proved that they had defeated martial god Tianjue. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains had survived the calamity and was temporarily safe. However, when everyone saw the unconscious Ji Tianxing, they became anxious again. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Huanglong Taoist and a few elders hurriedly came forward and surrounded Luo Shui and Yun Yao. They looked at Ji Tianxing with concern. Mistress, how are Master's injuries? Divine Master Luo Shui, what happened to our Grand Master? Luo Shui glanced at them and said sternly, Tianxing is seriously injured and unconscious. However, his life is not in danger. You don't have to worry. I will treat his injuries. You should quickly comfort the disciples and be on full alert. Huanglong Taoist hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed. He said solemnly, I understand. Please don't worry, Divine Master. Then, he turned and left with a few elders to comfort the disciples. Luo Shui and Yun Yao brought Ji Tianxing and quickly entered the secret chamber of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains Palace. The secret chamber was dimly lit and filled with rich, five-colored spirit qi. Yun Yao carried Ji Tianxing and placed him on the iced jade bed in the corner. Luo Shui walked to the bed and stood still. He instructed Yun Yao, You are also seriously injured. Quickly go and treat your injuries. Leave Tianxing to me. Yun Yao shook her head and said, No, I have the divine armor to protect me. My injuries are not serious. Let's help Tianxing treat his injuries together. Luo Shui saw that her attitude was firm and did not try to persuade her anymore. She formed hand seals with both hands and sent out a dense, icy blue light into Ji Tianxing's body to treat his injuries. Chapter 2362. Soon, 2 days had passed. The Pillar of Heaven's mountains regained its tranquility, and the disciples cultivated as usual. Only Huanglong Taoist and a few elders had been waiting outside Ji Tianxing's secret chamber, patiently waiting for news. In the secret chamber, Luo Shui had been casting spells continuously for 2 days and 2 nights. She was already mentally exhausted and looked tired. After all, she was also seriously injured and had not rested. Yun Yao's situation was slightly better, but she was also dispirited and looked tired. Finally, Luo Shui stopped and ended the spell. Yun Yao followed closely behind and also retracted her magic power. Phew! Luo Shui let out a long breath and revealed an expression of relief. All right, I've already controlled Tianxing's divine soul injury. It's no longer a big problem. He'll be able to wake up after resting for 1 more day. Hearing her say so, Yun Yao was relieved and nodded. Thank you, Divine Master. You're also seriously injured. Hurry up and heal your injuries. Luo Shui nodded and said, Don't force yourself. Heal your injuries and recover your vitality as soon as possible. Don't affect the child in your belly. I'm going back to the Divine Kingdom. Only in the upstream Divine Altar can I heal my injuries as soon as possible. If there's any situation or news, send me a message. Yun Yao quickly nodded and said, Understood. Divine Master, go back and heal your injuries. Luo Shui did not say anything else. Her figure flashed and broke through space and teleported away. After she left, Yun Yao got up and walked out of the secret chamber. Huang Long and a few elders, who had been guarding the door, quickly surrounded her and asked about the situation with concern. Mistress, how's Master's situation? Yun Yao nodded to everyone and comforted them. Don't worry. Tianqing's injuries are no longer serious. He'll wake up soon. Now that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is in a critical situation, you must not slack off. Keep an eye on the 72 cities at all times. If there's anything unusual, report it immediately. Huanglong Taoist and a few elders were finally relieved. They quickly bowed and said, "Yes, mistress." Yin Yao gave a few more instructions and asked everyone to leave. After Huanglong and the other elders left, she returned to the secret chamber and began to heal her injuries and recover her magic power. A day later, Ji Tianqing woke up. However, his injuries were too severe. His face was still pale, and his aura was very weak. Although Yun Yao was healing herself, she was constantly paying attention to his condition. Seeing that he was awake, Yun Yao quickly ended the treatment and came to him to ask about the situation. "Tianqing, are you feeling better?" "Yes, the situation is much better." Ji Tianqing nodded. He slowly sat up and asked, "Yao Yao, how are your injuries?" Yun Yao shook her head and comforted him. "I have the mystic armor to protect me. I'm only slightly injured. It's nothing serious." Ji Tianqing was relieved. He turned his head and looked around the secret room. Seeing that there was only him and Yun Yao in the secret room, he asked, "Where's Luo Shui? How is she?" Yun Yao explained patiently. "The Divine Master is also severely injured. However, she endured her injuries and healed you for 2 days and 2 nights. She left yesterday evening and returned to the Luo Shui Divine Nation to heal." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He then asked, "How's the situation at Tianju Mountain? Is there any movement at the 72 cities?" Yin Yao comforted him gently. "Don't worry about these things. I've already instructed Huanglong to keep an eye on the 72 cities. If there's any news, they'll report it. The most important thing now is to heal your injuries and recover your strength as soon as possible." Ji Tianqing obviously knew this. He said with a worried expression, "I took a full blow from martial god Tianju. It's lucky that my body wasn't destroyed. With such severe injuries, I'll need at least 2 to 3 years to fully recover. However, the situation is critical now. How can we have so much time?" Yin Yao thought for a moment and said with a serious expression, "If that's the case, then we can only go to the Divine Pagoda to heal." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Yes, that's the only way. The flow of time on the 6th floor of the Divine Pagoda is 50 times faster than the outside world. I only need half a month. I hope that after Inyu takes over the 72 cities, he'll rest for a period of time." Yin Yao's expression became more and more serious. Her heart was filled with worry. "I'm just worried that Inyu won't give us that much time." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, "The only thing we can do now is to send a message to Luo Shui. We'll discuss with her and see if she has any ideas." Yin Yao quickly took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to Luo Shui. The two waited patiently for half an hour before they received Luo Shui's reply. Yin Yao cast a spell and opened the communication jade slip. A light screen lit up in front of her, and an image appeared. In the image, there was a huge ice blue altar. At the top of the altar, there was a huge water ball. It was half black and half blue and looked extremely mysterious. Luo Shui was wearing an ice blue dress. She had an elegant and noble temperament. She sat cross-legged in the water ball and was circulating her energy to heal her injuries. She closed her eyes and said calmly, "I've already heard about you leading a large number of warships and foreign race experts to invade the 72 cities. Therefore, I've sent out a large number of elite scouts to keep an eye on the 72 cities' movements and keep an eye on them. And Yu's wild ambition is obvious. His next target will definitely be the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. However, you don't have to worry. Go to the Divine Pagoda and enter seclusion to heal your injuries. Once I've recovered, I'll head to the 72 cities first to assassinate the foreign race experts. I'll obstruct their plan of attack and buy time for you." As soon as she finished speaking, the image on the light screen gradually disappeared. Yin Yao relaxed her brows and said with a smile, "Tianqing, God Lord Luo Shui really has a plan. She's circulating her energy to heal her injuries in the upstanding water divine altar. She should be able to recover soon. If she personally heads to the 72 cities to assassinate the foreign race experts, she'll definitely be able to achieve miraculous results. Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a gratified expression, "The ancestor demon God wants to kill me. Martial god Tianju also wants to kill me. Even in you and the foreign race experts want to take my life. Now that we're in an extremely dangerous situation, only she will help us wholeheartedly." Yin Yao nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. We in the Luo Shui divine nation will live and die together. We must work together to resolve this crisis." Ji Tianxing's eyes were burning. He said with confidence and determination, "Even if there are thousands of dangers, they won't be able to defeat me. Once I return to the God realm, I'll definitely kill all the demon race, martial god Tianju, and the foreign race. Believe me, that day will come very soon." Yin Yao looked at him expectantly and nodded heavily. Then, Ji Tianxing took out the small golden pagoda and cast a spell to open a light door. He and Yin Yao stepped into the teleportation light door and left the secret room in a flash. Swoosh! In the next moment, the two crossed thousands of miles and entered the Juqian Tenju Tower. They appeared on the altar on the 5th level of the Divine Pagoda. Chapter 2363. The dimly lit 6th floor was completely silent. There were only a few rays of distorted 5-colored light in the depths of the darkness. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao moved forward in the darkness and could feel the difference in the flow of time. Although the situation at Pillar of Heaven's Mountains was critical and there was not much time left for them, before they went into seclusion to recuperate, the two of them still went to visit Ji Ku. Ji Ku was cultivating in seclusion in the distorted space-time. She lay in the darkness calmly and was in a state of deep concentration. She was unaware of everything around her. A layer of pale, golden flames enveloped her body and made her look even more noble and mysterious. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were surprised that Ji Ku's strength had improved tremendously and she had reached the 2nd level of the martial sage realm. Moreover, she had obtained the inheritance of the mysterious demon god and had been cultivating in the darkness. Her strength would definitely increase tremendously. Ji Tianxing observed for a while and suddenly realized something. The pale golden flames around Ji Ku's body was like a protective shield. The flames surged slowly like flowing water, faintly condensing into a strange scene. The most obvious pattern was that of a firebird. Its body was long and elegant, and its wings and tail were long and narrow. It was a pity that the flames flowed continuously and the pattern of the firebird was faintly discernible. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao observed for a while, but could not see clearly what kind of demonic beast it was. The two of them did not want to disturb Ji Ku's cultivation. They suppressed their doubts and turned to leave. Then, the two of them sat down in the darkness and took out a large number of elixirs and spirit stones. They started to recuperate and recover their powers. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, a year had passed in the darkness. After a year of recuperation, Yin Yao's injuries had healed and she had returned to her peak state. She continued to cultivate in seclusion and tried her best to increase her strength and break through to the 8th level of the martial sage realm. Ji Tianxing's injuries were too serious. Even though he had spent a year and consumed a large number of spirit stones and elixirs, his injuries had not healed completely. In order to completely heal his injuries, he had to recuperate for another year before he could return to his peak state. A year had passed in the dark space, but only 7.5 days had passed in the outside world. It was noon that day. Among the 72 cities, Heaven-reaching City was located in the middle. This ancient city with 3,000 years of history occupied an area of 200 miles in radius. The city walls were 300 meters tall and were extremely majestic. The city was surrounded by vast plains, and it was only several thousand miles away that there were endless towering mountain ranges. All this time, Heaven-reaching City had been very prosperous, with more than 4 million people under its rule. Moreover, The resources around heaven-reaching city were abundant. Not only were there endless medicinal gardens, but there were also more than a dozen large spirit stone veins. However, after Enyu led his fleet to invade the 72 cities, he took over heaven-reaching city. He and the other captains used a secret technique to control the sky-reaching city lord, vice city lord, garrison general, and other experts. The soldiers and commoners in the city could only choose to submit under the pressure of the experts of the Heaven Punisher race. After half a month of reorganization, the entire heaven-reaching city fell under Enyu's control. He used this place as his capital to control all 72 cities. At that moment, 20 battleships that were 1,000 meters long were gathered in the sky above heaven-reaching city. 2,000 warriors of the Heaven Punisher race were waiting in the battleships. A strong, murderous aura shrouded the entire heaven-reaching city, causing the heavens and earth to darken. The commoners in the city were anxious and trembling. They hid in their homes and did not dare to show their faces. Everyone was guessing that the foreign tribe army was about to set off again. However, they did not know which force was going to suffer this time. Inside the city lord's mansion, more than 20 experts of the Heaven Punisher race had gathered in the meeting hall. Enyu, who was dressed in golden armor, sat at the head of the table, looking high and mighty. 20 captains in silver armor stood on both sides of the hall. They were all experts of the martial god realm. Enyu looked at the crowd sternly and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, according to General Fu Long's orders and instructions, we have to advance slowly and steadily. Only in this way can we successfully realize our plan to rule this world. It has been half a month since we took over the 72 cities. After half a month of planning and reorganization, we have completely taken control of the 72 cities. Some follow-up work is still in progress. Soon, this place will become our base camp, the most solid fortress. However, today, the time is ripe. We will set off again and point our swords at the pillar of heaven's mountains." Enyu's stern voice reverberated in the hall. After he finished speaking, the captain in silver armor said, "Deputy General, and we have been bored during this period of time. With our strength, we can crush the entire world. Why do we have to be so cautious?" The other captains nodded in agreement and chimed in impatiently. "We should have led the troops to set off a long time ago to flatten the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and attack the Luo Shui Holy Kingdom. As the saying goes, speed is the most important thing in war. If we delay like this, the people of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will be scared out of their wits and run away in advance. We have to be so cautious when dealing with a small pillar of Heaven's mountains. Won't we have to spend a few hundred years attacking the 3 holy kingdoms in the future?" In the end, many captains were unhappy with Enyu's high position. However, the captains did not dare to complain to the dragon subduing general. Instead, they frowned at Enyu and expressed their opposition. Enyu knew everyone's reaction and mentality. He was not angry. Instead, he said sternly, "I can completely understand everyone's feelings. Therefore, we will set off today and attack the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Since all the captains are so impatient, I also wish you all success and success in your endeavors. After we take down the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the dragon subduing general will reward us according to our merits. Let's go." And he waved his hand and gave the order to set off. He stepped across the hall and walked towards the door. The 20 captains followed closely behind. However, as soon as Enyu reached the entrance, he saw 2 black-armored guards rushing towards him with hurried expressions. "General, something bad has happened." "General, there is an urgent report from the front line. There is enemy news." 2 guards clad in black armor rushed to the entrance as fast as lightning, bowed to Enyu, and reported the situation with an anxious tone. Enyu stopped his tracks and frowned. With a sullen face, he asked, "What happened? Why are you so flustered?" The 20 captains behind Enyu were also puzzled. Their gazes gathered on the 2 guards. The 2 guards did not dare to talk nonsense and quickly reported the truth. "General, and just this morning, Qingyuan City in the south was suddenly invaded by an expert. More than a dozen elite soldiers guarding Qingyuan City were all killed by a mysterious powerhouse. After the mysterious expert left Qingyuan City, he sneaked into the nearby Chang'e City and assassinated 9 elite soldiers. Captain Qi Ling, who was guarding Chang'e City, personally went to stop the mysterious expert, but was killed on the spot. Chapter 2364. What? Captain Qi Ling was killed? And Yu's expression suddenly changed. His eyes narrowed as a trace of shock flashed across his eyes. When the 20 captains heard this news, they all revealed expressions of disbelief and exclaimed in surprise. How was this possible? Wasn't Qi Ling a second-level martial god? Was that mysterious powerhouse also a martial god? Where did this mysterious powerhouse come from? How many people were there? What did that mysterious powerhouse look like? Which organization did he belong to? Everyone found this unbelievable and began to question the guards who had sent the message. The 2 guards who had sent the message were startled and shook their heads at the same time. According to the report from Chang'e City's guards, the mysterious powerhouse and Captain Qi Ling were fighting outside the city. The shockwaves from their battle were too terrifying, and no one was able to get within 500 kilometers. Aside from Captain Qi Ling, no one knows how many powerhouses there were, whether they were male or female, or which organization they came from. This answer stunned Yu and the other captains, and their expressions became rather strange. Everyone frowned and began to whisper to each other. Even now, we don't know who the opponent is. Isn't this too ridiculous? The guards of Qingyuan City were killed, and Captain Qi Ling was killed as well. But we don't even know if the enemy is male or female. Aren't there very few powerhouses in Shenwu continent? And there are only 3 martial gods? If the mysterious powerhouse was acting alone, then he must be one of the 3 martial gods. What do we do now? If the mysterious powerhouse could kill Qi Ling, then he must be able to kill the other captains as well. 1 or 2 captains might not be a match for that person. We need to work together to kill him. The 20 captains expressed their own opinions, and they were all trying to guess the identity of the mysterious powerhouse and discussing countermeasures. And Yu's expression became increasingly ugly, and he frowned in thought for a moment before speaking in a dignified tone. It seems that some people don't want us to take Tianzhu Peak so easily. However, this is a disgrace to our race, and it is also a huge threat. For now, we can only temporarily give up on attacking Tianzhu Peak and take care of the mysterious powerhouse first. Otherwise, if this person were to wander between the various cities, he would very likely cause even greater casualties to us. Hearing this, the 9 captains nodded in agreement. However, 7 of them shook their heads in disagreement. There were still 4 people who maintained a neutral attitude and remained silent. What mysterious expert? He's just a martial god. Why are you so scared? How can we stop our attack plan because of a mysterious expert? Even if that mysterious expert is very strong, we don't have to mobilize so many people, do we? In my opinion, we should send a few captains to surround that person and kill him. The remaining captains should continue to attack Pillar of Heaven's mountains. The few captains who were against the idea all suggested to Yu, and Yu was unhappy. He looked at them coldly and said in a deep voice, "Well, since you're so confident, I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. The 7 of you should join hands and take the battleship and the men to encircle that mysterious expert. As long as you guys can successfully complete the mission, I will definitely request for you guys to be rewarded heavily by General Dragon's subduing." Hearing his words, the 7 captains all frowned and had different opinions. Deputy General and Yu, what is the meaning of this? Are you testing us on purpose? Deputy General, and are you trying to provoke us? Seems like Deputy General and is looking down on us. If that's the case, we'll accept this mission and kill that bullshit expert so that Deputy General and can take a good look at us. Deputy General, and please remember what you said just now. Set up the celebration banquet and wait for our triumphant return. Let's put it bluntly. You can send us to encircle that mysterious expert, but you can't bring your men to attack Pillar of Heaven's mountains and take all the credit for yourself. You have to wait for us to come back. The 7 captains were unhappy with Yu. so they accepted the mission unyieldingly. In order to prevent Yu from cheating them, they asked Yu and the rest of the captains to wait in heaven-reaching city. Yu was enraged by the attitude of the captains. He sneered and said, "All right, I'll set up the celebration banquet and wait for you guys to come back at the governor's mansion. Of course, you have to end this quickly and don't affect our attack plan. I'll give you guys 5 days at most." The 7 captains held their heads high and sneered confidently. "Don't worry, Deputy General, and celebration banquet is mine. 5 days? That's more than enough. If we complete the mission ahead of time, will Deputy General and give us an extra reward?" And Yu pretended that he did not hear the last sentence and said, "Time is of the essence. You guys should depart now." The 7 captains did not say anything else. They saluted Yu and the rest of the captains, turned around, and stepped into the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the blink of an eye, they flew into their respective battleships. Then, the 7 battleships sailed out from the fleet and flew towards the south. Soon, they disappeared into the horizon, and Yu and the rest of the captains turned around and returned to the meeting hall. The atmosphere was a little tense. The captains were talking to each other through voice transmission. One of the captains with a beard wanted to curry favor with Yu. He asked, "General, those 7 guys are obviously unhappy with you. Why do you still want to help them?" "Help them? Why do you say that?" And Yu raised an eyebrow and asked in confusion. The bearded captain frowned and said, "You sent them to kill the mysterious elite. After they complete the mission, you still want to reward them. Isn't that helping them?" And Yu's lips curled into a sneer as he said in a playful tone, "I know more about the 5 elements world than you do. Do you think this mission is that easy to complete? They don't know how high the sky is, and they still want to enjoy the celebration banquet? He. I don't want them to come back like stray dogs." The bearded captain was even more confused. He asked, "If the Einherjar in this world is really that powerful, why did you send them to kill the mysterious elite? If they fail and are killed by the mysterious elite, won't we lose our men and our plan to conquer this world?" And Yu smirked. "So what? Even if those captains are killed, they are sacrificed in the line of duty. They can only blame themselves for not being as strong as the enemy. I've done a great job, and I'm promoted to Deputy General. Many of the captains are jealous and dissatisfied. They have been living a smooth life. They are very confident and arrogant. If they don't suffer some setbacks and learn their lesson, how will they listen to my orders obediently?" The bearded captain suddenly came to a realization. His face was full of admiration. He smiled and said, "I see." Chapter 2365. Late at night, there were no stars in the night sky, and it was as dark as ink. In the southern region of the 72 cities, there was a city called Luhi City. The entire city was silent, deep in slumber under the curtain of night. There were more than 1 million citizens in the city. Most of them were from the human tribe, and a small number of them were from the demon tribe. However, the city was now under the control of the Heaven Punisher tribe. Not only was there a martial God Realm captain in the city governor's mansion, but there were also 18 warriors from the Heaven Punisher tribe in the city. Even though it was late at night, there were still more than 10 patrols in the city. The city guards on the surrounding city walls were also on high alert as they rested their spears on their heads. However, the defense was completely useless against a martial God Realm expert. In a secret room filled with spiritual chi and cultivation resources deep in the city governor's mansion, 2 warriors from the Heaven Punisher tribe in black armor were checking the mountain of resources and putting them into their interspatial rings. These were the treasures and resources that they had obtained after taking over Luhi City. Suddenly, a beam of icy blue light silently shone in the corner of the secret room. Swoosh! 2 beams of bone-chilling sword radiance instantly pierced through the darkness and aimed at the chests of the 2 warriors in black armor. The 2 of them were caught off guard, and before they realized anything was wrong, the sword radiance pierced through the scales on their chests. Bam! Bam! With a muffled sound, the armor worn by the 2 men was pierced, and the scales on their chests were shattered. Before the 2 of them could even scream, they fell to the ground and died. Then, An icy blue figure walked out from the darkness in the corner of the secret room. This slim and graceful figure was wearing an ice blue dress. Her face was beautiful, and her temperament was noble and cold. She glanced at the corpses on the ground and threw out a ball of icy blue flame, burning the two corpses to ashes. Without a doubt, she was martial god Luo Shui. She had fought with the Heaven Punisher tribe before and knew their weakness. Thus, when she assassinated the martial sages in black armor, she killed them with one strike. After taking care of the two corpses, she waved her sleeve and put the mountain of cultivation resources into her interspatial ring. Although she was the ruler of the Holy Kingdom and was rich, she did not care about these resources. However, she was unwilling to let those resources fall into the hands of the Heaven Punisher race and strengthen them. In just 2 breaths' time, she had emptied all the resources and treasures. Her figure immediately became transparent and disappeared from the secret room. Not long after, she appeared in another room 1,000 feet away. In this room, there was a black armor guard who was cultivating. Luo Shui hid in the dark, shooting out an icy blue sword chi with a flick of his finger, instantly killing the black armor guard. Next, she teleported to another room and assassinated 2 black armored warriors without making a sound. As time passed, she appeared and disappeared like a ghost in the city lord's manor, coming and going without a trace. In the short span of an hour, she had consecutively killed 12 black armored warriors. With her divine consciousness, she discovered that there was only one martial god realm captain left in the city lord's mansion. There were also 6 black armored warriors scattered around the city walls. Luo Shui decided to kill the captain first before dealing with the remaining black armored warriors. The study of the city lord's manor was brightly lit. A middle-aged man who was as muscular as a rhinoceros and wore silver armor sat before a tall table, frowning as he pondered something. He was the captain of the battleship Nebula, a 3rd-level martial god realm expert. Ever since the Heaven Punisher race had taken over the 72 cities, Nebula had been busy. In order to completely control Luhi City and plunder as many resources and treasures as possible, he was worried sick. Not long ago, he had received a message from Anu. It was said that a mysterious expert had infiltrated the 72 cities and was assassinating the captain and the Heaven Punisher warriors. Up until now, more than 30 warriors had been killed, and Captain Shi Ling had also been assassinated. And you reminded him to be more alert and to report immediately if there were any abnormal situations. When Nebula heard the news, he was worried and was considering how to deal with it. At this moment, an extremely cold and dangerous aura instantly appeared from the corner of the study. Nebula, who was in deep thought, was startled awake when he sensed the cold aura. He almost instinctively turned around and punched behind him. At the same time, a dazzling icy light pierced his chest and was about to pierce his armor. Boom! In a deafening explosion, Nebula's fists hit the icy light. A shock wave that could destroy heaven and earth instantly exploded in the study. Boom! Visible icy blue ripples swept through the entire city lord's manor and spread in all directions. It was about to affect half of Luhi City. The city lord's manor was destroyed on the spot. Palaces, houses, and courtyards were reduced to rubble by the shockwave. Hundreds of people in the manor were instantly killed and turned into dust. They were buried in the ruins. Nebula was also sent flying by the shockwave. He rolled and smashed into the street 10 miles away. The straight and wide limestone street had long been twisted and broken. After Nebula landed, he created a deep hole in the ground and dust flew up into the air. He felt intense pain in his internal organs and blood kept flowing out of the corner of his mouth. Intense shock filled his mind. He crawled out of the ruins with a horrified expression and flew into the night sky. Damn it! Who sneaked an attack on me? How could they be so powerful? Could it be the mysterious powerhouse that General mentioned? Nebula did not hesitate to draw his bronze saber and put on a defensive posture. He looked around with a malicious gaze. At this moment, the night sky above his head lit up again with an icy blue light. Swoosh! A giant icy blue sword that was thousands of feet long, slashed down from the sky. Before the sword light arrived, the bone-chilling cold had already locked onto Nebula's soul. His body was cold and stiff, and he could not move an inch. At the moment of life and death, he could only wave his saber and desperately slash out 3 blood-red saber lights to block the icy blue sword. Bang! 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 The blood-red saber lights collided with the icy blue sword, causing an earth-shattering explosion. The icy blue sword shattered into millions of ice crystal fragments and scattered in the night sky. The blood-red saber lights also collapsed. Nebula was once again sent flying and smashed into the ruins below. Another huge hole was created in the ground, and more than 10 ravines split open. The entire Luhi city shook violently, as if a super earthquake had occurred. The people in the city were awakened and ran away in panic, letting out cries of fear and despair. The previously silent city suddenly became noisy and chaotic. Nebula did not have time to care about the situation in the city. He cursed with a ferocious expression and turned to fly towards the north. He didn't even get to see who his opponent was before he was severely injured. He knew very well that if he continued to stay in Luhi City, he might lose his life. In order to save his life, he was willing to give up Luhi City. Swoosh! Nebula, who was shocked and flustered, teleported 300 miles away and fled to the sky above the wasteland outside the city. However, the other party seemed to have expected him to escape. Chapter 2366. Pung Pung Pung. Xingyun couldn't dodge in time and was struck by the 3-sword race. A loud explosion shook the sky, causing the night sky to tremble violently. An icy blue shockwave visible to the naked eye spread out like a ripple, sweeping across an area of 800 kilometers. Xingyun was sent flying, and the silver armor he was wearing completely shattered, scattering into the night sky. His right arm and hind leg had been cut off, and blood was gushing out. After flying dozens of miles in the night sky, he crashed heavily into the wilderness outside the city. A deep crater was smashed into the ground, and mud flew up into the air. At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky where he had been standing. The slim figure in ice blue looked down at him from above, her beautiful face filled with cold, murderous intent. Nebula looked up at the night sky, and only then did he see the enemy's appearance clearly. It was actually a peerlessly beautiful woman in a blue dress. Xingyun was stunned for a moment. Then he was immediately awakened by the sharp pain all over his body. He quickly turned around and fled towards the north. His fighting spirit was crushed, and he didn't want to stay even a moment longer. He only wanted to leave this place as soon as possible and get away from that terrifying goddess of death. However, he was already heavily injured and his strength was extremely weak. Shua! He cast a spell to break open the night sky and was about to teleport away. However, the woman in the blue dress chased after him. She appeared behind him out of thin air, about 10 miles away. She raised her left fist expressionlessly, and a ball of dazzling white light shot through the air. Boom! With a loud explosion, the spatial crack that Xingyun had created was shattered on the spot. The berserk impact force blasted Xingyun back 10,000 feet away, vomiting blood repeatedly from his mouth. At the same time, the woman in blue brandished her divine sword and slashed out more than 300 times in an instant. Swish! Swish! The overwhelming icy blue sword light formed a mysterious and profound sword formation that enveloped the nebula. Xingyun was horrified. His eyes were filled with grief, anger, and despair. In the next instant, the sword formation erupted with destructive power. Hundreds of sharp sword lights crisscrossed and pierced through the nebula. The only thing that could be heard was the continuous explosion of the muffled sounds that reverberated in the night sky. Xingyun was cut and chopped by the sword light ceaselessly. Blood gushed out from his body, and countless pieces of flesh and bones flew out. After a full 10 breaths of time, his physical body was minced into pieces by the sword formation and was completely destroyed. The Heaven Punishers were different from the humans of the Five Elements world. Once their physical bodies were destroyed, they would be completely dead. There would be no continuation of their souls. A moment later, the icy blue sword formation that covered a radius of 10,000 feet gradually dissipated. Pieces of flesh and blood rained down from the sky, mixed with a spatial ring. The woman in the blue dress walked over and waved her sleeve. She grabbed the ring and put it away. Then, she turned around and flew back to Luhi City. From the beginning to the end, only Xingyun saw her real face, but it was useless. The citizens of Luhi City still did not know what had happened and were still in chaos. Clamorous shouts and screams reverberated throughout the city. Countless civilians and martial practitioners fled in panic. Under the control of the 6 black armored guards, the city guards guarding the city suppressed the fleeing citizens and stabilized the situation in the city. However, after the woman in a blue dress returned to Luhi City, she merely used an eighth of an hour to kill the 6 guards that were scattered throughout the city. The experts of the Heaven Punisher clan who had stayed behind to guard Luhi City had all died. The city lords, deputy city lords, guards, and nobles who were controlled by the Heaven Punishers became puppets with their strings cut. They no longer gave orders. They stayed in their own residences and waited quietly. No matter how chaotic the situation in the city was, they were indifferent. After all, they were controlled by the Heaven Punishers' secret technique. Without the orders of the Heaven Punishers, they would not do anything. 2 hours later, the chaotic and noisy Luhi City gradually quieted down. The citizens who were filled with fear and worry gradually calmed down when they saw that there was nothing unusual inside or outside the city. There were no signs of fighting either. A night passed. When a new day arrived and the sun rose, everything returned to normal. However, at this moment, 7 black warships that were 10,000 feet long sped over from afar. The 7 warships stopped above Luhi City and hovered high in the sky, blocking the warm sunlight. The hearts of the citizens in the city, which had just settled down, immediately rose to their throats. Everyone hid in their residences and did not dare to show their faces. They were afraid that they would anger the foreign race experts and be killed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The doors of the 7 warships opened. 7 captains in silver armor flew out along with dozens of soldiers in black armor. These 7 captains had been ordered to surround and kill the mysterious expert. Just last night, they had received news that Luhi City had been ambushed by a mysterious expert and had rushed over to check the situation. Unfortunately, they were a step too late. The dozens of soldiers in black armor rushed to the city lord's mansion and the surrounding city walls to check the situation. The 7 captains gathered in the sky above the city. They observed the situation in the city as they discussed. The captain in the lead was the oldest. He was an old man with a head full of white hair. He frowned as he looked at the devastated Luhi City. His weathered face was as cold as ice. It looks like we're too late. The other captains were full of indignation as they cursed bitterly. Despicable bastard. How could he escape so quickly? Don't let us catch him. Otherwise, we'll cut him into pieces and chop him into mincemeat. The city lord's mansion has been destroyed. The entire city is filled with cracks and ruins. It looks like it was done by a martial god. I wonder if anyone witnessed the battle and saw the appearance of the mysterious expert. Everyone calm down. Let's wait for the scouts to check the situation first. 15 minutes later, the dozens of soldiers in black armor returned to the sky and reported the news to the 7 captains. My lords, the city lord's mansion has been destroyed. No one is left alive. The battle ended 6 hours ago. The soldiers guarding Luhi City were all killed. However, no one saw the mysterious expert. My lords, I found traces of a battle in the wilderness outside the city. There's also the remains of Captain Xingyun's body. The 7 captains' faces changed when they heard the news of Xingyun's death. Shock filled their eyes. What? Captain Xingyun was really killed? How could this be? Could it be that Xingyun didn't even have a chance to escape? Xingyun had reached the level 3 martial god realm, but he was still killed by the mysterious expert. How powerful is that person? After the mysterious expert succeeded in the assassination, he quickly left and waited for the opportunity to find his next target. This is troublesome. How can we guess the whereabouts of the mysterious expert? How can we find him? The captains discussed among themselves. Their faces were filled with worry. Previously, when they were in front of Yu, they were full of confidence and acted as if they could capture him easily. Chapter 2367. 2 hours later, the 7 captains checked the inside and outside of Lewis City. They even rushed to the wasteland outside the city to collect the remains of Xingyun's body. After that, a 3rd-level martial god realm captain cast a spell on the ruins of the city governor's mansion. He cast the ultimate skill of the Heaven Punisher clan, the tracing divine skill. This secret skill could use the remaining aura of the heavens and earth to restore what had happened not long ago according to the current scene. Even though this divine art was very profound and the captain had yet to fully grasp it, he was still able to do so. With his strength, he could only restore what had happened in one day. But this was enough. He stood in the ruins with a solemn expression and waved his hands to cast a mysterious spell, releasing thousands of wisps of blood-red light. Endless blood-red light scattered between heaven and earth, covering the ruins of the city governor's mansion. The other 6 captains were all standing outside the ruins, looking on with anticipation. After about 15 minutes, the captain finished casting the spell. Swoosh! In the sky above the ruins, thousands of wisps of blood-red light condensed into a 30-meter-long light screen. A blurry image appeared in the dark red light screen. It was the city governor's mansion before the incident. As the image changed, an icy blue sword light suddenly flashed. A pair of iron fists that were as black as dragon claws fiercely hit the sword light. Instantly, a destructive shockwave exploded in the city governor's mansion. The huge city governor's mansion was immediately destroyed into ruins, and countless ravines appeared on the ground. Then, a burly figure soared into the sky and flew out of the city. A wisp of icy blue light streaked across the sky and chased after the burly figure, disappearing from the image. After a few breaths, the dark red light screen dissipated. The captains looked at each other in shock and confusion. Although the image was blurry, they could vaguely see that the burly figure was the captain of Xingyun. As for the icy blue light, it should be the mysterious expert who had assassinated Xingyun. From the image, the mysterious expert suddenly assassinated Xingyun and destroyed the city governor's mansion with one move. That's right. The mysterious expert only used one move to severely injure the captain of Xingyun and forced him to flee. However, Captain Xingyun was killed outside the city after escaping for only a few hundred miles. Even with Xingyun's strength, he could only escape a few hundred miles away. You can imagine how terrifying that mysterious expert's strength is. I dare to confirm that the mysterious expert's ability is absolutely at 5th stage realm and above, or possibly even at 7th stage realm. It's a pity that I still can't see the appearance of the mysterious expert clearly. I can only see a ray of blue light. Everyone thought that they would be able to find some clues using the tracing divine spell. But in the end, there was still no progress. The leading white-haired elder said with a grave expression, "Everyone, the mysterious expert is very strong. Furthermore, he appears and disappears unpredictably. He is very difficult to deal with. We must brace ourselves and do our best to deal with this. Only by successfully completing the mission would he be able to hold his head high. Otherwise, and you will laugh at us." Everyone nodded to show that they understood. Their expressions and eyes were also very serious. "Don't worry, Captain Baiyun. Since we dared to accept this mission, we are confident that we can complete it. Even if we have to pay a high price, we have to complete it successfully. We can't let you look down on us. It's only now that I understand that in you that fellow is really sinister. No wonder he intentionally provoked us. Captain Baiyun, make a decision. How should we deal with this?" Captain Baiyun was the leading white-haired elder. He muttered to himself for a moment and spoke out in a low voice. "Everyone has seen it. There should only be one mysterious expert. This person is always alone and mysterious. He is extremely difficult to deal with. But this person's actions are traceable. Earlier, he had sneak attacked Qingyuan City and Chang'e City. Last night, he sneaked an attack on Luhi City. These three cities are not far apart from each other, and the order is from south to north. So the mysterious expert's next target should be one of the nearby cities. Captain Baiyun's analysis was clear and logical. The other few captains nodded their heads continuously, expressing their agreement and conviction. Captain Baiyun continued, "This seat has seen the map. There are two cities nearest to Luhi City. They are Giant Spirit City in the north and Chao Mountain City in the northwest. Tonight, these two cities might be attacked. So we can only split into two and rush to these two cities as quickly as possible to wait." Hearing what he said, the eyes of the captains lit up with anticipation. Yes, Captain Baiyun's method is feasible. Not just that, we need to send a message to the guards of these two cities and have them cooperate with us. Once we discover the mysterious expert has invaded, we need to find a way to delay the mysterious expert. Also, we need to use the blood shadow crystal to record the appearance of the mysterious expert. The mysterious expert is very strong. If we split into two, I fear it will be difficult to kill him. Once we discover this person's whereabouts, we need to keep in contact and complete the encirclement as quickly as possible. The captains brainstormed and put forward different suggestions. Soon, the plan was perfected. Seeing everyone agree, Captain Baiyun did not waste words and said decisively, "Shuang Yu, Ling Yuan, and Chong Ling, you three will follow this seat. We will immediately rush to Giant Spirit City in the north. The mysterious expert may attack there. The remaining three captains, you will rush to Chao Mountain City. If there is a situation, immediately send a message." None of the captains objected, and the matter was settled. Then, everyone returned to their respective warships and left quickly. White Cloud, Shuang Yu, Ling Yuan, and Chongling's 4 warships quickly rushed to Giant Spirit City in the north. The other 3 warships rushed to Chao Mountain City as fast as lightning. Giant Spirit City was very close to Luha City, only 60,000 miles away. The warships were very fast and reached the vicinity of Giant Spirit City in just 4 hours. In order to keep it a secret, the 4 warships stopped a few hundred miles away from the city. The 4 captains walked out of the warships and cast spells to shrink the warships 10,000 times. They turned into pitch-black swords and carried them on their backs. Then, they used an invisibility spell and sneaked into Giant Spirit City. There were only 20 martial sage realm warriors in black armor guarding Giant Spiritual City. There were no martial god realm captains guarding the city. After the 4 entered Giant Spirit City, they did not disturb the black-armored warriors guarding the city. They spread out and hid near the surrounding city walls, waiting patiently. A short while later, the other 3 captains sent a message saying they had arrived at Chao Mountain City. Also, the 3 captains put away their warships and quietly entered the city master's mansion to hide. There was a martial god realm captain in Chao Mountain City who was temporarily the city master. He had 15 black-armored warriors under his command. The 3 captains met up with him and hid in the city master's mansion, waiting for the mysterious expert to walk into the trap. When the 2 groups finished their ambush, it was already evening.